Good morning, dear colleagues. Can I ask you to take your seats? So, dear colleagues, let's start. On the 1st of July, Hungary assumed the presidency of the Council of the European Union, and today we have the Prime Minister Viktor Orbán in the European Parliament for a debate with members. The Hungarian presidency is the first of this new legislature and has a particular role and responsibility in delivering on what our citizens want and expect from our European Union. We are having this debate today in the shadow of devastating floods that raged across Hungary and different member states 2 weeks ago, and let me use this opportunity to reiterate this Parliament's support for all the victims of this tragedy and our commitment to help all those impacted in rebuilding and getting people back on their feet. That is Europe in action, and that is European solidarity. The Hungarian presidency arrives at an important moment of institutional change. A new mandate here brings new challenges and opportunities which we must jointly all together embrace. This summer we witnessed the highest voter turnout in the European elections in 30 years, electing this House as the voice of Europe's democracy. And in the next weeks we will vote in a new College of Commissioners to start working on addressing the priorities that matter to people, the decisions that will shape the future of Europe. There are many other significant steps forward for our Union that we'll take together over the coming weeks, months and years, including supporting Ukraine, strengthening European competitiveness and building a more stable, secure Europe in a world of increasing uncertainty. A union of democracy, prosperity and security that protects our values everywhere. Now, Europe may not be perfect. It is, after all, a work in progress, and while we must be honest about where we can do better, we should also not shy away from celebrating our successes. Today we are here to discuss the Hungarian presidency's priorities that I hope will lead to more European success stories. Prime Minister, many of us recall the very lively debate 6 years ago, exactly here today in the Chamber. I expect no less today, because in this House of Democracy, as in Europe where the rule of law and freedom of expression are sacrosanct, we may not always agree, but we will always give space for the respectful sharing of views. There is a saying in Hungarian, sok kicsi, sok rahmadzsi. Lots of small will amount to a lot. That is the power of Europe, that together as Europeans we can achieve so much more than we could alone. So on that note, dear Prime Minister, the floor is yours.
Tisztelt Metsola elnök asszony, tisztelt von der Leyen elnök asszony, tisztelt képviselők, hölgyeim és uraim! Azért jöttem, hogy ébresztőt fújjak. Draghi és Macron elnök úr példáját követem. Az Európai Uniónak változtatnia kell, és én erről szeretném önöket ma meggyőzni. Magyarország 2011 után másodszor tölti be az Európai Unió Tanácsának soros elnökségét. Én személyesen is másodszor látom el ezt a feladatot. Álltam már itt önök előtt, másodszor mutatom be önöknek a magyar elnökség programját. 34 éve vagyok parlamenti képviselő, ezért tudom, hogy megtiszteltetés, hogy önök most meghallgatnak engem. Miniszterelnökként beszélni a parlamenti képviselők előtt mindig megtiszteltetés. Van összehasonlítási alapom. 2011-ben, az első elnökségünk idején is válságokkal küzdöttünk. Kezelnünk kellett akkor a pénzügyi válság következményeit, az arab tavasz következményeit és a fukushimai katasztrófát. Akkor erősebb Európát ígértünk és teljesítettük is, amit vállaltunk. Elfogadtuk az első európai szintű roma stratégiát és a Duna stratégiát is. A mi elnökségünk alatt indítottuk el az európai szemeszter nevű gazdaságpolitikai koordinációs folyamatot, ami akkor még valóban az volt, aminek hívták. És az első elnökségünk alatt fordult elő utoljára, hogy az Unió sikeresen lezárt egy csatlakozási folyamatot, Horvátország csatlakozását. Emlékeztetőül mindez 2011-ben történt. Nem volt könnyű, de a munkánk ma sokkal nehezebb, mint akkor volt. Nehezebb, mert az Unió helyzete ma jóval súlyosabb, mint 2011-ben. És talán súlyosabb, mint az Unió története során bármikor. Mit látunk ma? Ukrajnában, vagyis Európában háború dúl, súlyos konfliktusok pusztítanak és hatnak ki ránk a Közel-Keleten és Afrikában, és mindegyik konfliktus magában hordozza az eszkaláció veszélyét. A migrációs válság 2015 óta nem látott méreteket ölt, az illegális migráció és a biztonsági fenyegetések most már azzal fenyegetnek, hogy a schengeni térség szétesik. És mindeközben Európa veszít globális versenyképességéből. Mario Draghi szerint Európát lassú agónia fenyegeti, és idézhetem Macron elnök urat is, aki szerint Európa meghalhat, mert 2-3 éven belül kiszorul a piacairól. Tisztelt képviselők, látható, hogy az Unió a saját sorsát meghatározó döntések előtt áll. Mélyen tisztelt elnök asszony, az elnökség természetesen szervezési és koordinációs munka is, ügyintézés. Jelentem a tisztelt képviselőtársaknak, hogy eddig 585 tanácsi munkacsoport ülést vezettünk le, 24 nagyköveti tanácskozást elnököltünk, megtartottunk 8 formális és 12 informális tanácsülést, 69 elnökségi rendezvényt bonyolítottunk Brüsszelben, 92 rendezvényt pedig Magyarországon. A magyarországi rendezvényeinken több mint 10 000 vendéget köszönthettünk. Tájékoztatom önöket, hogy a tanácsi jogalkotási munka teljes gőzzel zajlik. 52 jogalkotási dosszién dolgozunk a tanács különböző szintjein. Az elnökség kész bármikor megkezdeni a trilógus tárgyalásokat is az Európai Parlamenttel. Jelenleg mindössze kettő jogalkotási dossziéban folytatunk trialógust önökkel, de van még 41 dosszié, amiben erre szükség lenne, és várjuk, hogy ez megtörténhessen. Tudom, hogy választások voltak, és ilyenkor nehéz intézményi átmenetnek vagyunk tanúi, de most már eltelt 4 hónap, és mi készen állunk arra, hogy a 41 konzultációra váró dossziéban is együttműködhessünk önökkel. A magyar elnökség tisztességes közvetítőként és konstruktív együttműködésre törekszik valamennyi tagállammal és intézménnyel. Ugyanakkor a magyar elnökség meg fogja védeni a tanács szerződéseken alapuló jogosítványait, például az Európai Parlament és a Bizottság közötti intézményközi megállapodás tekintetében is. De tisztelt képviselők, mélyen tisztelt elnök asszony, az elnökség nem csupán ügyintézés, a magyar elnökségnek politikai felelőssége is van. Azért jöttem most ide önökhöz Strasbourgba, hogy bemutassam, mit javasol a magyar elnökség Európának ebben a válságos időszakban. A legfontosabb, hogy a mi uniónknak változnia kell. A magyar elnökség a változás hangja és annak katalizátora kíván lenni. A döntéseket az unió tagállamainak és az intézményeinek kell meghozniuk, nem a magyar elnökségnek. A magyar elnökség problémákat vet fel és javaslatokat tesz az unió békéje, biztonsága és jóléte érdekében. Első helyre soroljuk a versenyképesség problémáját. Szinte mindenben osztom Letta és Draghi elnök urak jelentéseinek helyzetértékelését. Röviden, az EU gazdasági növekedése az elmúlt 2 évtizedben tartósan lassabb volt, mint az Egyesült Államoké és Kínáé. Az uniós termelékenység lassabban növekszik, mint a versenytársaké. A világkereskedelmi részesedésünk csökken. Az unió vállalatai 2-3-szor magasabb villamos energiaárakkal szembesülnek, mint az Egyesült Államokban. A földgázárak itt 4-5-ször magasabbak. Az orosz energiáról való leválás következtében az Európai Unió jelentős GDP növekedést veszített el. És közben jelentős pénzügyi forrásokat kellett átcsoportosítani energiatámogatásokra és a cseppfolyósított földgáz behozatalához szükséges infrastruktúra megépítésére. Az európai vállalatoknak a fele az energiaköltséget tekinti a beruházások fő akadályának. Az energiát intenzíven használó iparágak esetében, melyek fontosak az unió gazdaságában, a termelés 10-15%-kal esett vissza. Ilyen tisztelt elnök asszony, a magyar elnökség azt javasolja, hogy ne ringassuk magunkat abba az illúzióba, hogy a zöld átmenet önmagában megoldást kínál erre a problémára. Ez nincs így. Még ha teljesülnek is a megújuló energiaforrások telepítésére vonatkozó célkitűzések, tehát még ha teljesülnek is a céljaink, induljunk ki ebből, legyünk pozitívak, minden elemzés szerint 2030-ig nem csökken jelentősen azoknak az óráknak az aránya, amelyben a fosszilis tüzelőanyagok határozzák majd meg az energiaárakat. Ezzel szembe kell néznünk. Az európai zöld megállapodás alapja az volt, hogy új zöld munkahelyeket hozunk létre. Azonban a kezdeményezés értelme megkérdőjeleződik, zöld munkahelyeket hozunk létre. Azonban a kezdeményezés értelme megkérdőjeleződik, ha a dekarbonizáció az európai termelés visszaeséséhez és munkahelyek elvesztéséhez vezet. Az autóipar az uniós tervezés hiányának egyik legkirívóbb példája, ahol iparpolitika nélkül alkalmazzuk a klímapolitikát. Úgy alkalmazzuk a klímapolitikát, hogy közben nincs iparpolitikánk. Az EU azonban nem követte a klímaambíciókat az európai beszállítói lánc átalakításának ösztönzésével. Ezért az európai vállalatok jelentős piaci részesedést veszítenek. Ha pedig a kereskedelmi korlátozások felé lépünk, és látom, vannak ilyen tervek, higgyék el, még több piacot fogunk veszíteni. Tisztelt képviselők! Az Európai Unió és az Egyesült Államok közötti termelékenységi szakadék kialakulásának fő oka, azt hiszem, a digitális technológia volt, és úgy tűnik, hogy a mi lemaradásunk, Európa lemaradása így tovább nő. A mi vállalataink fele annyit költenek kutatásra és fejlesztésre GDP arányában, mint az Egyesült Államok vállalatai. Ehhez társulnak még kedvezőtlen demográfiai folyamatok. Látható a számokból, a migráció nem kompenzálja az EU népességének természetes csökkenését. Vagyis ez azt jelenti, hogy Európa modernkori történelme során először lépünk be egy olyan időszakba, amikor a termelésünk, a GDP növekedését nem fogja támogatni a munkaerő folyamatos növekedése. Óriási kihívás. Draghi és Macron elnök urak után én is azt mondom, a helyzet súlyos és azonnali cselekvést igényel. A 24. órában vagyunk. A most úttörőnek számító technológiákban néhány éven belül eldől, hogy ki maradt talpon. Kérem, fontolják meg, hogy a leépülő ipari kapacitásokat sokkal nehezebb visszahozni, mint megtartani. Az elveszített készség, tapasztalat és szaktudás nem, vagy csak nagyon nehezen pótolható. Nem akarom önöket azzal áltatni, hogy van könnyű vagy egyszerű megoldás. Ezek súlyos kihívások és súlyos gondok. De szeretném az intézményi ciklus elején egyértelművé tenni, hogy a tagállamok ezen a téren gyors és határozott fellépést várnak az európai intézményektől. Várjuk, tagállamok várják az adminisztratív terhek csökkentését. Várjuk a túlszabályozás enyhítését. Várjuk a megfizethető energia biztosítását. Várjuk a zöld iparpolitikát. Várjuk a belső piac erősítését. Várjuk a tőkepiaci uniót. És a tagállamok várják a kereskedelempolitika szélesítését, blokkosítás helyett a konnektivitást növelő kereskedelempolitikát. Miért tisztelt elnök asszony, van néhány siker, amire építhetünk. Az Európai Unió dinamikusan fejlődő akkumulátoripara ilyen siker. Legalábbis ezt mondja Draghi elnök úr. Az akkumulátor technológiára fordított közfinanszírozás az elmúlt évtizedben átlagosan 18%-kal nőtt, és ez kulcsfontosságú volt Európa pozíciójának megerősítésében. Ma már Európa, Japán és Dél-Korea mögött harmadik helyen áll az akkumulátor tárolási technológiákra vonatkozó szabadalmi bejelentések terén. Ez nagy javulás. Úgy látszik, hogy a célzott és stratégiai beavatkozás Európa számára sikeres és előnyös lehet. Tisztelt Ház, tisztelt képviselőtársak! A magyar elnökség célja, hogy elfogadjunk egy új európai versenyképességi megállapodást az Európai Tanács budapesti informális ülésén november 8-án. Új versenyképességi paktumot. Meggyőződésem, hogy a legmagasabb szintű politikai elkötelezettség lendületet ad az európai versenyképességi fordulathoz, amire szükségünk van. Javaslom, hogy ezt állítsuk az előttünk álló intézményi ciklus cselekvési tervének középpontjába. Engedjék meg, hogy a versenyképesség után mondjak néhány szót a migrációs válságról is. Európát évek óta sújtja a migrációs nyomás, ami hatalmas terhet ró különösen az unió külső határain elhelyezkedő tagállamokra. Az unió külső határait meg kell védeni. A külső határok védelme az unió egészének érdekeit szolgálja, ezért ahhoz az uniónak érdemi támogatást kellene nyújtania. Nem először állok itt önök előtt, és nem először mondom el, önök is láthatják, hogy 2015 óta Magyarország is, és személyesen én is komoly politikai vitákat vívok a migráció ügyében. Sok mindent láttam már, láttam kezdeményezéseket, csomagokat, javaslatokat, amelyek nagy reményekkel fogadtak, és mind sikertelennek bizonyult. Ennek egyetlen oka van, higgyék el nekem, hogy külső hotspotok nélkül nem tudjuk megvédeni az európaiakat az illegális migrációtól. Ha egyszer valakit beengedünk, az többet nem fogjuk tudni hazaküldeni. Ha van a tartózkodási jog alapja, ha nem. Egyetlen megoldás van. Csak azokat szabad beengedni az Unió területére, akiknek erre előzetesen megadtuk az engedélyt, és belépni csak az engedéllyel lehet az Unióba. Minden más megoldás meggyőződésem szerint illúzió. Ne áltassuk magunkat, az EU menekültügyi rendszere ma nem működik. Az illegális migráció Európában az antiszemitizmus, a nők elleni erőszak és a homofóbia erősödését eredményezte. Több tagállam már többen is tiltakoznak ezzel, de szeretném megismételni. A tények magukért beszélnek. Az illegális migráció Európában az antiszemitizmust, a nők elleni erőszakot és a homofóbia erősödését eredményezte. Ha tetszik ez önöknek, ha nem, ezek a tények. A sikertelen migrációs politika következménye is világos. Több tagállam a menekültügyi rendszerből való kimaradás lehetőségeit igyekszik megteremteni. Tisztelt képviselőtársak! Az illegális migráció és a biztonsági félelmek a határellenőrzések tartós és kiterjedt visszaállításához vezettek. Azt hiszem, ideje ezzel a kérdéssel a legmagasabb politikai szinten foglalkozni és megvitatni, újra teremthető-e a schengeni térség valódi működtetéséhez szükséges politikai akarat. A magyar elnökség egy javaslatot tesz. Hozzuk létre a Schengen summitok rendszerét. Hívjunk össze rendszeresen Schengen summitokat, a schengeni térség állam és kormányfőinek részvételével. Egyszer ez már bejött. Emlékszem, 2008-as gazdasági válságra adott válaszunknak fontos része volt az euróövezet vezetőinek csúcstalálkozója. Ez egy sikeres koordináció volt, amit az is jelez, hogy 2012-ben egy nemzetközi szerződéssel ezt intézményesítettük. Ez az eurócsúcs. Úgy látom, hogy ma a schengeni övezet van hasonló válságban, ezért itt most szükség lenne egy hasonló politikai elköteleződésre, Schengen summitra, és utána pedig egy nemzetközi szerződéssel történő intézményesítésre. A magyar elnökség nem csak azt javasolja, mélyen tisztelt elnök asszony, hogy a schengeni térséget erősítsük meg és bővítsük ki, a magyar elnökség azt is javasolja, hogy az év vége előtt történjen meg Bulgária és Románia teljes körű csatlakozása. Tisztelt képviselő hölgyek és urak, a migráció mellett Európát számos egyéb biztonsági kihívás is érinti. Ezeknek a megvitatására november 7-én, 2 nappal az amerikai elnökválasztás után Budapesten összeülő európai politikai közösség csúcstalálkozója alkalmas fórum lesz. Tisztelt elnök asszony, szembe kell néznünk azzal a ténnyel, ha az európai biztonságról beszélünk, hogy ma az Unió nem képes saját békéjét és biztonságát szavatolni. Szükségünk van az európai biztonság és védelem politika intézményesítésére. A magyar elnökség ennek egyik, talán legjobb útját az európai védelmi ipar és technológiai bázis megerősítésében látja. A magyar elnökség ezért az európai védelmi ipari stratégiára és a védelmi ipari tervre összpontosít, de a kihívás ennél azért sokrétűbb, mert érint tagállami és uniós kompetenciákat, sőt nemzetközi szövetségesi struktúrákat is. A magyar elnökség a saját példáját, Magyarország példáját tudja felajánlani. Mi a nemzeti össztermékünk mintegy 2,5%-át fordítjuk védelmi kiadásokra, nagy része fejlesztés. Védelmi beszerzéseink túlnyomó többsége európai védelmi ipari forrásokból származik, és a védelmi ipar valamennyi szegmensében zajlanak ipari beruházások Magyarországon európai szereplők részvételével. Ha ez lehetséges volt Magyarországon, ez lehetséges az egész Európai Unióban. Tisztelt elnök asszony, a magyar elnökség kiemelt témája a bővítés is. Egyetértés van abban, hogy az unió bővítés politikájának érdem-alapúnak, kiegyensúlyozottnak és hitelesnek kell maradnia. A magyar elnökség meggyőződése szerint a Nyugat-Balkán csatlakozásának fölgyorsítása az európai biztonság kulcskérdése. A régió integrációja gazdasági, biztonsági és geopolitikai szempontból egyaránt előnyös az EU számára. Külön figyelmet kell fordítanunk Szerbiára. Szerbia felvétele nélkül a Balkán nem stabilizálható. Amíg Szerbia nem tagja az Európai Uniónak, addig a Balkán instabil térség marad. Tájékoztatom önöket, tisztelt képviselő hölgyek és urak, hogy több tagjelölt ország is teljesíti a továbblépés technikai feltételeit, de hiányzik a tagállamok közötti politikai konszenzus. Kérem, emlékezzenek vissza arra, hogy az Unió több mint 20 éve tett egy ígéretet. Adtunk egy ígéretet a nyugat-balkáni országoknak az európai perspektívára. A magyar elnökség szerint ideje lenne az ígéretet beváltani. Amit mi tenni tudunk, hogy összehívtuk az Európai Unió Nyugat-Balkán csúcstalálkozót, ahol előrelépést szeretnénk elérni. Engedjenek meg egy megjegyzést az európai mezőgazdaságról. Mindannyian tudjuk, hogy az európai mezőgazdaság versenyképességét a rendkívüli klimatikus körülmények, a megemelkedett költségek és a harmadik országokból érkező import és a túlzott szabályozás jelentősen lerontotta. Ma már nem túlzás, ha azt mondom, hogy mindez az európai gazdálkodók létbiztonságát veszélyezteti. Az élelmiszertermelés és élelmiszerbiztonság stratégiai jelentőségű kérdés minden ország számára és az Unió számára is. Ezért a magyar elnökség politikai irányt szeretne mutatni az újonnan felálló Európai Bizottságnak egy versenyképes, válságálló és gazdabarát európai mezőgazdaság megteremtése érdekében. Tisztelt képviselők, a magyar elnökség stratégiai vitát kezdeményezett a mezőgazdaságon túl, a kohéziós politika jövőjéről is zajlanak a viták. Bizonyára önök is tudják, hogy az Unió lakosságának mintegy negyede olyan régiókban él, amelynek fejlettségi szintje nem éri el az uniós átlag 75%-át. Ezért Európa számára elengedhetetlen a régiók közötti fejlettségbeli különbségek csökkentése. A kohéziós politika nem jótékonyság és nem adomány, valójában az EU legnagyobb beruházási politikája és a belső piac kiegyensúlyozott működésének előföltétele. A magyar elnökség úgy gondolja, hogy ennek folytatása kulcsfontosságú az Európai Unió versenyképességi potenciáljának megőrzéséhez. Tisztelt képviselők, tisztelt elnök asszony! A magyar elnökség közös európai problémákra keres olyan megoldásokat, amelyek a józan ész talaján állnak. De nem csak megoldásokat keresünk, mi magyarok az Európai Unióban továbbra is keressük az álmainkat, a szabad és egyenlő nemzetek közösségét, a hazák hazáját, a demokráciák demokráciáját. Keressük az Istent félő és az emberek méltóságát védelmező, a kultúra, a tudomány, a szellem csúcsait ostromló Európát. Nem azért vagyunk tagjai az Európai Uniónak, mert olyan, amilyen, hanem azért, amilyen lehetne. És amíg úgy látjuk, hogy Európát olyanná tudjuk tenni, amilyen lehetne, amíg erre van egy fikarcnyi esély is, addig küzdeni fogunk érte. Mi a magyar elnökségben sikeres Európai Unióban vagyunk érdekeltek, és meggyőződésem szerint elnökségünk sikere az egész Európai Unió sikere lesz. Tegyük újra nagyjá Európát. Köszönöm, hogy meghallgattak.
Thank you. I give the floor now to the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen. Right. Okay. All right, okay. This is not the Eurovision, huh? All right. All right. All right. And it is more Casa de Papel than ABBA, but this is not the Eurovision. Let's respect the dignity of this House. Please, President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, please take the floor.
Thank you very much, President Metsola, Prime Minister Orban. Honourable members, we meet 3 weeks later than planned because of the floods that ravaged Central Europe. 5 months' worth of rain fell on Central Europe in just 4 days. Extreme weather events are the new normal of climate change. At the same time, its destructive power is too big for any country to fight on its own. The water reached the gates of the most iconic landmarks in Budapest. It destroyed crops and damaged factories. But in these 3 weeks, we have seen the people of Hungary rolling up their sleeves and helping one another. Europe wants to be at their side. Hungary requested the support of our Copernicus satellites, and we stepped in, and it helped coordinate the rescue teams and map the damage. We are also ready to mobilise our civil protection mechanism and the Solidarity Fund for all countries in the region, including Hungary. Hungary can request our support, as others plan to do. The European Union is there for the people of Hungary, in this emergency and beyond, and the Hungarians deserve the full benefits of membership and access to the European funds. Honourable members, today I would like to stay focused on some of the most pressing issues that we are facing during this presidency of the Council. First, Ukraine. Second, competitiveness. Third, migration. Our Ukrainian friends are heading into the third winter of war, and Russia is trying to make it the hardest winter yet. Last month, Russia sent over 1,300 drones against Ukrainian cities. Throughout the summer, hundreds of missiles have rained on Ukrainians' energy infrastructure. Countless Ukrainians have been killed or wounded. Families have been separated. Cities have been destroyed. The world has witnessed the atrocities of Russia's war. And yet, there are still some who blame this war not on the invader, but the invaded, not on Putin's. There are still some who blame this war not on Putin's lust for power, but on Ukraine's thirst for freedom. So I want to ask them, would they ever blame the Hungarians for the Soviet invasion in 1956? Would they ever blame the Czechs or Slovaks for the Soviet repression of 1968? Would they ever blame the Lithuanians for the Soviet crackdown of 1991? We Europeans may have different histories and different languages, but there is no European language in which peace is synonymous with surrender and sovereignty is synonymous with occupation. The people of Ukraine are freedom fighters, just like the heroes that freed Central and Eastern Europe from Soviet rule. And there's only one path to achieve a just peace for Ukraine and for Europe. We must continue to empower Ukraine's resistance with political, financial and military support. Last month in Kyiv, I announced that we will provide up to 35 billion euros in loans to Ukraine as part of the $50 billion pledged by the G7. This loan will be repaid by the windfall profits of immobilized Russian assets, and it will flow directly into Ukraine's national budget. So, we are making Russia pay for the damage it caused, and we will stand with Ukraine through this winter and for as long as it takes. Honourable members, the second priority I would like to touch upon is competitiveness. 1 year ago, in my State of the Union address here in Strasbourg, I announced Mario Draghi's report on the future of European competitiveness. Now we have all heard his call to action. Let me focus on two priority areas. First, on closing the innovation gap with other major economies. Draghi's analysis is very clear on why we are losing ground, especially on breakthrough digital innovations. Too many of our innovative companies have to look at the United States or Asia to finance their expansion, while 300 billion euros of European household savings are invested in foreign markets every year. And too many barriers still exist in our single market, preventing our companies from scaling up across borders. This is why we have proposed a savings and investment union. We need to lower barriers for companies to grow across borders. And we will propose a new push to complete our single market, reduce regulation on burdens, reduction on burden of reporting in sectors like finance and digital. And this is the direction to travel to strengthen our competitiveness. But what we also see is that one government in our union is heading in the exact opposite direction, drifting away from the single market. I listened very carefully today. How can a government attract more European investments if at the same time it discriminates against European companies by taxing them more than others? How can it attract more companies if at the same time it imposes export restrictions overnight? And how can a government be trusted by European businesses if it targets them with arbitrary inspections, blocks their permits, if public contracts mostly go to a small group of beneficiaries? This creates uncertainty and undermines investors' trust. And all of this at a time when Hungary's GDP per capita has been overtaken by its Central European neighbours. Hungary is at the heart of Europe, and it should be at the heart of our economy. The Hungarian people should enjoy the full benefits of our single market. Second, the Draghi report calls for a joint plan for decarbonisation and growth. Let me address those who still think that we should stick to dirty Russian fossil fuels. Just a few days after Russian tanks rolled into Ukraine, European leaders gathered in Versailles, and all 27 agreed to diversify away from Russian fossil fuels as soon as possible. So, where are we on that pledge? 1,000 days later, Europe has indeed diversified. We built infrastructures and new ties with reliable partners. We invested in cheap and clean energy that is made in Europe, and with success. In the first half of the year, 50% of all our electricity generation came from renewables, homegrown, our own energy, good jobs in Europe and not in Russia. But not everyone has acted on the Versailles commitments. Instead of looking for alternative sources, in particular, one member state just looked for alternative ways to buy fossil fuels from Russia. Russia has proven time and again it is simply not a reliable supplier. There can be no more excuses. Whoever wants European energy security, first and foremost, has to contribute to it. That is the rule we have to go. And honourable members, finally on migration. Everybody understands that migration is a European challenge that requires a European answer. And this is why the European Parliament and the Council adopted the new Pact on Migration and Asylum. And now we must implement it. We are already looking at member states, including those at the external borders of our Union, to help them manage our common frontier. Prime Minister, I heard your words over the weekend. You said that Hungary is protecting its border and that criminals are being locked up in Hungary. I just wonder how this statement fits with the fact that last year your authorities released from prison convicted smugglers and traffickers before they did their time. This is not fighting illegal migration in Europe. This is not protecting our union. This is just throwing problems over your neighbour's fence. We all want to better protect our external borders, but we will only be successful if we work together against organised crime and show solidarity among ourselves. And speaking about whom to let in, how can it be that the Hungarian government invites Russian nationals into our union without additional security checks? This makes the new Hungarian visa scheme a security risk, not only for Hungary, but for all member states. And how can it be that the Hungarian government would allow Chinese police to operate within its territory? This is not defending Europe's sovereignty. This is a backdoor for foreign interference. Yes, we have to strengthen Frontex. Yes, we have to finalise the legislation on anti-smuggling, reinforce Europol, implement the pact in full. But this can only be achieved with more European cooperation, not less, and of course in full respect of our rule of law and fundamental values. Honourable members, this is the second time that Hungary takes the presidency of the Council. The first time was in 2011. And on that occasion, Prime Minister Orban said, and I quote, "We will follow in the footsteps of the revolutionaries of 1956, and we intend to serve the cause of European unity. Europe must stay united to stand its ground." End of quote. I think we all agree. Europe must stand united. This was true back then, and this is still true today. So let me conclude by addressing the Hungarian people. We are one family. Your story is our story. Your future is our future. 10 million Hungarians are 10 million good reasons to keep shaping our future together. Thank you, and long live Europe.
Thank you. Thank you. Now we start. Now we start with the President of the EPP Group, Manfred Weber.
Madam President, Parliament, Commission, dear Prime Minister, long time no see. Welcome in the Parliament. My first message also goes to the Hungarian people. They can count on Europe. Devastating floods, more than 20 people lost their lives. Europe will stand together to help people rebuild their homes, churches, schools. Decisive actions, friends who support you in a moment of need, that's Europe at its best. Hungary is a European country, Hungary is a strong country, and Hungary can always count on Europe's solidarity. I listened carefully to the presentation of Viktor Orban today, and I must say I'm quite shocked, because he spoke about agriculture, he spoke about migration, he spoke about the battery technologies for the future of Europe, but he didn't mention Ukraine, dear friends. He didn't mention Ukraine with one single sentence. I spoke about solidarity, and at this moment of time, the biggest need for European solidarity is to give a common answer to war being back in Europe. That is a real question which we have to answer. And I have hard times to understand why you, as a former freedom fighter, ignore the will, the desire of the Ukrainians to live not only in peace but also in freedom. I have hard times to understand that you collaborate with the aggressors. And I have hard times, as also Ursula von der Leyen said it, that one of the closest advisors of you said publicly, Hungarians made a mistake in 1956 to stand up against the Russian occupation. For me, Hungarians are freedom fighters and heroes fighting for peace, Europe and democracy. Prime Minister, reality is the following. You visited Putin in February 2022. A few days later, Putin attacked Ukraine with a brutal, unprovoked war. What have you told him? Has he shown you the military deployment plans? And this summer again, you visited Putin, and only 48 hours later, he bombed a children's hospital, killed innocent children in Ukraine. Prime Minister, that are the facts. That is the outcome of policy you are representing. Your trip was never a peace mission. It was a big propaganda show for the autocrats and those who are defining our European way of life. Your trip was not a peace mission. Your trip was never a peace mission, it was a war prolongation mission. That is what we speak about. And when we speak about content, we can talk about everything, about migration, about climate change, jobs. We do this here every day, so it's not a news for us when you present some ideas. The key question is another one. Because on migration, we found in April this year an overall compromise between all countries in Europe, the big parties in the European Parliament. We want to give an answer, and Hungary is outside, is isolated, is not having part of this. When you compare today's presidency with 2011, the last presidency, you met 13 years ago all EU leaders. You met several times all EU institution leaders. You were in the centre of Europe. Today, no one really wants to see you. In 2011, you had 44 high-level meetings in Budapest. Today, no one wants to come to Budapest. In 2011, the Hungarian presidency closed 103 legislative files. Today, no progress at all. Back then, you were in the center of Europe. Today, you are alone, you are sidelined. That is the question you have to answer. Why nobody wants to speak with you? And I also know that you are telling journalists and the public that you are now claiming to be the conservative centre-right leader. But let's have a look on the PFE group. Geert Wilders became famous in Italy. Do you know why? Because he said publicly, I quote, "No cent of European support for Italy," quote end. That is Wilders. I don't know whether Salvini discussed this with him. I don't know whether he did so. That's not patriotism. That is egoism and that is nationalism. Dear colleagues, Le Pen in France, Vlaams Belangen in Belgium, they were opposing to the idea to welcome, for example, Romania, Hungary and Slovakia inside of the European Union. That's not patriots for Europe. That is nationalists against Europe, dear friends. And that's why we will criticise this. And let's be also clear, Viktor, you didn't win the elections. Fidesz is not the winner of the elections. You had in the last mandate 12 seats and now you have 10 seats. So don't create this image that you have the support. The EPP, we won elections. That's why Ursula von der Leyen, Roberta Metsola, we have the chance to lead in Europe. And we won because we followed our DNA as Christian Democrats and as conservatives. You are trying to present you as a true conservative, but I tell you, Margaret Thatcher was a mother of today's European single market. She was leading these policies. Ronald Reagan stood up against communism and won. He did not please autocrats and anti-democrats. Helmut Kohl unified East and West with good policies like the Euro and the Schengen proposal. He united and didn't split Europe. That is the true nature of Christian Democrats and EPP. These conservative leaders knew that the democratic world and Europe are stronger together. They would never be Putin's and Xi's puppets. Dear friends, that is about the European reality. And when we finally focus on the Hungarian reality, corruption is killing Hungary's future. We see the consequences every day. 4,000 Hungarian teachers left their jobs only last year due to terrible working conditions. And nearly 400,000 Hungarians emigrated in the last decades. They are fed up about corruption. As the EPP, we know Hungary deserves better. Hungarian deserves a strong voice in Europe. And when Peter Magyar was the first time in the EPP group meeting, he said the pro-European and pro-rule of law-based Hungary is back in the EPP with 7 MEPs. Today, the TISA party is neck on neck with Fidesz in the polls. And I know you're getting nervous about this, but I tell you, just as Pavel defeated Babiš in Czech Republic, just as Tusk defeated Kaczynski in Poland, TISA and Peter Magyar will defeat you in Hungary. Mr. Orban, you are the past, Peter Magyar is the future. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I give the floor now to Irache Garcia Perez. Can I please ask everybody to respect the speaker? Thank you. Ms. Garcia Perez, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, President. Mr. Orban, welcome to the European Parliament. Welcome to the home of European democracy, where we defend our ideas and the European project. Your main contribution to the European Union since you came to power in 2010 was the formation of a new far-right group here in this Parliament, who we call the false patriots, you could say. And it's precisely you that has used your false patriotism to demolish democracy, to survive on corruption and to violate the rights of those who do not think like you, because you said that you want to defend Europe. The problem is the Europe that you defend, only allows in those who think like you. It ignores the other Europeans, and that's a serious problem for democracy, because Europe is a mix of people. It's diverse, it's pluralistic, and what makes us great is that thanks to those differences, we've been able to move forward together and build a common project. How can you talk about homophobia and gender-based violence when in your country you are removing the rights and the laws that protect women and the LGBT community? Please, that is a real danger. Please, be consistent, Mr. Orban. One more question. Are you aware of the harm that you are causing to the European society by sowing hatred towards what's different and those who feel different? Mr. Orban, your false patriotism is full of a defence of Christian values. What do you mean by Christian values? Christianity is about neighbourly love, compassion and human dignity. Christianity teaches us to welcome strangers, to care for the vulnerable and to show solidarity with those who suffer. Closing borders to human beings who are fleeing war and persecution is a betrayal of Christian values. Your false patriotism also. You criticise the EU criticising Hungary about Hungary, but then you talk about millions of funds going to corrupt oligarchs. You demonise the European Union, yet you are bowing to Putin's regime, and you show disregard for human rights. What kind of peace are you talking about? How do you talk about peace with a tyrant such as Mr. Putin, who has an arrest warrant from the International Criminal Court for the murder of children? There are bombings of hospitals and schools. And we also need to talk about the situation in Hungary, the lack of judicial independence, one of the lowest purchasing powers in the European Union, one of the highest inflation rates in the EU, an non-existent system of social protection, taxes on huge multinationals, and the people in Hungary are paying the highest VAT, and you blame the EU. This is the classic method of the populists and the far right. They're blaming others for their own incompetence. The real patriots do not become rich at the expense of their homeland. They don't sow fear in order to accumulate power. True patriots asserts his sovereignty in the face of challenges such as climate change. It calls for unity to work together and defend ourselves from Trojan horses. The EU was built on the promise to end authoritarian regimes. The Hungarian people has also been an example of the fight for freedom since the revolution of 1848 and the uprising against the Soviet regime in 1956. That promise is alive now. We need to remain firm and united in the defence of our freedom, our union and of our democracy. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I give the floor for the PFP Group, Kinga Gál.
Ms. von der Leyen, this was the epitome of hypocrisy, and it's not worthy of the Commission. Prime Minister, I am very happy that I can speak here to you on behalf of the Patriots for Europe group, the third biggest in the European Parliament. It's a historic moment, and you can see it irritates Mr. Weber. We formed our party based on a desire from voters to see change. And we need to have a common sense-based policy. This is what is needed in Europe right now. Prime Minister, Europe is in a worse situation than at any point in the last few decades, and the President of the Commission campaigned against the government rather than talking about these issues. The fact that peace is at risk, the fact that we need to stop illegal migration, and European competitiveness is on the decline. Therefore, we welcome the new European competitiveness deal proposed by the Hungarian Presidency. Because European prosperity is at risk, we welcome the proposal for the Schengen summits as well, which would allow free movement within the Schengen area. And this is what Brussels is actually destroying, one of these cornerstones of the EU. And we welcome all initiatives which leads to a stop of bloodshed in Ukraine. It leads to ceasefire, communication and peace. We reject all lies used to attack Hungary and our Hungarian Prime Minister. Rather than a hate campaign, we need to focus on European prosperity and peace. With the cordon sanitaire in this Parliament has acted against the Patriots for Europe. But we Patriots are proud that our Prime Minister is realistic about the situation. He says what the problems are in Europe and also makes specific proposals. Prime Minister, you can count on the Patriots for Europe group. And voters can rely on us across Europe. Thank you.
I give the floor now to Nicola Procaccini, co-chair of the ECR group.
Thank you, President Orban. We share a number of the objectives set out in your programme. I'll just mention a couple because I don't have much time. The people of the European Union are experiencing a demographic winter which is freezing in nature that has to be countered by looking after the primary nucleus of any political community better, and that is the family. And we can't look for the solution of the fall in the birth rate as being immigration. If we don't care for immigration in the proper way, with firmness, and looking to check transit of migrants, then Europe will implode and it will lose a heritage that has been fought for, hard won over the course of time. And also we believe there needs to be a change to the green transition in the European Union. We are starting to see clearly the limit and problems with this that we've announced before. Amongst others, this would include a loss of competitiveness, loss of economic resources to defend the environment, and those sectors of the social structure that are poorest and least well off, but also the the industrial dependence and political dependence on the insidious Chinese regime. And so, as a friend, I have to say that there are certain things that we don't share in your political plan either, your geopolitical plan. We have an internal adversary. There are people who are trying to cancel Western culture from within and trying to cancel the reasons why we come together. But we also have external enemies who are much more dangerous, and you appear not to be aware of this. And this is the alliance between China, Russia, Iran and North Korea, the so-called quartet of chaos. They constitute the antithesis of any form of Hungarian patriotism or European or Western patriotism. It's the antithesis of freedom and beauty, of justice, of democracy. These values that we define and we intend to defend as being the ones taught to us by the people of Buda of 1956.
Valérie Ayer, 5 minutes on behalf of the Renew Group.
Madam President, Prime Minister, Mr. Orban, it must change you being here. You're not used to being faced by a parliament which asks you for accountability. That's what we're planning to do this morning, to ask for accountability. I ask for accountability on our values, on our money and our geopolitics. I'll start with a question, Mr. Orban. Who are you today? Where is the fighter for freedom who commemorated Imre Nagy? You proclaim long live freedom, and you adopt laws which reduce the right to demonstrate. You torment women who want to have an abortion by forcing them to listen to the heart of their fetus. You proclaim long live the family. You hunt down all the families who don't correspond to your narrow vision of the world. You bring to heel judges by forcing them into retirement, but that's not what will make your compatriots to renounce for independent justice. You spy on journalists, you put your loyal people at the head of the media, but that won't make people in Hungary give up freedom of expression. You can hunt down Anna Donat, but whatever your false accusations, she will continue to fight with all the opposition. Yes, Prime Minister, we are liberals, and we are proud of that, because freedom, it's the foundation of our Europe, and for you, it's corruption. Because, Mr. Orban, what is the basis of your regime? I'll tell you. It's a cluster of scams. Scams which cost a fortune for Hungarian and European taxpayers. For who? For your son-in-law, who has enriched himself because of phony public tenders for lighting in Budapest, and your childhood friend, a plumber, who overnight became a business magnate. Unfortunately, Hungary is the only country I know where a plumber come heating engineer become a billionaire overnight. And if that wasn't enough, you siphoned off 2 million euros of European money to run a little tourist train in your childhood village. And it seems that nobody's using it. We had Disneyland Orlando, we had Disneyland Paris. Dear colleagues, I can tell you that now we have Disneyland Fidesz. I've now turned to your European allies. Mr. Bardella, your so-called group of patriots for Europe, every day you say that Europe is wasting European money. But in your ranks you have a Prime Minister who squanders the money of the French, the Italians, the Germans, the Austrians. How can you say that you are patriots and credible? You are neither one thing nor the other. Mr. Orban, Hungary has just reached a record. You have an unprecedented brain drain. Where are these people going, these Hungarians? I'll let you guess. They're going to Western Europe, this Europe which you decry. Why are they leaving? Because of arbitrary power, because of the inflation, because of the corruption. You threaten to send migrant buses to Brussels, but the reality is that these buses, they're already leaving, but it is Hungarians in those buses. That's all you have to offer in terms of a geopolitical vision, Mr. Orban? Since you took the Presidents of Council, you've gone to kowtow to Putin and Xi Jinping. You block billions of euros in assistance to Ukraine. You give visas to Russian citizens. You let Chinese police patrol in your own streets. But, Mr. Prime Minister, where are you looking? Are you looking towards Brussels or towards Moscow? Towards Brussels or towards Peking? Madam President, how much time we will tolerate the blackmailing of Viktor Orbán? Will we have to wait for our values to be trampled on again? We should sustain voting rights for Hungary in Council. Prime Minister, the only thing that you do not reject from Europe is its checks. And the truth is that you don't dare to call to leave Europe because you depend on Europe, but also and above all because you know that the Hungarians won't follow you. And it's to them, the Hungarians, that I speak finally. To those who are listening to us from Hungary, your voice in Europe is blurred, but we are listening. And for every attempt to restrain your freedoms, you can count on us for support, because our common values are not negotiable. They are take it or leave it. Mr. Orban, in 2004, the Hungarians said yes to these values in large numbers. Us, the Hungarians, we want to keep them amongst us, but nobody will remember you.
To Terry Reintke, co-president of the Green Group.
Thank you, Madam President of the Commission, President of the Council of the European Union, Prime Minister Orban. I take note of the fact that you have been invited to this Parliament in your role as the Council President. Let me tell you on behalf of my group, you are not welcome here. This is the house of European democracy, not of corruption, of lies, of propaganda and autocratic rule. Mr. Orban, you have turned the Hungarian democracy into a hybrid regime of electoral autocracy. And on top of that, you are the servant of a brutal and dangerous dictator, Vladimir Putin. And already during this presidency, you have made abundantly clear whose interest you care about. You are not a strong leader, Mr. Orban, because what you are doing is weak. You are stealing democracy from Hungary, money from EU citizens. And honestly, you should not be standing here pretending that you have a fibre of constructive sense of dialogue left in you. For years now, Mr. Orban, this Parliament can see right through you. That is why what matters to me is to speak to the people in Hungary who are most affected by your regime. The journalists, the human rights defenders, the judges and academics, vulnerable communities like the LGBTI community, the opposition politicians that Orban drags in front of court in order to intimidate them. Defenders of independent journalism name Orban a predator of press freedom. Orban is listed the leader of the most corrupt government in the European Union. Human rights experts speak of a level of fear across society of retaliation, not just for human rights activists, but for artists, for academics and others in society too. The LGBTI community in Hungary desperately points out that they live in a bubble of hopelessness and terror in the middle of the European Union. All of this makes it clear you are not a strong leader, Mr. Orban, because all your actions are driven by fear. Fear of your own people, fear of freedom. And because you are so scared, you constantly have to spread lies and blame others to justify your authoritarian agenda, also the European Union. Because the European Union gives people hope that your attacks on rule of law will not go unpunished, that nepotism and corruption will have consequences, that the European Union protects the rights and freedoms of the people in Hungary. Freedom is what the European Union stands for, and freedom is what you fear the most. So what we will give you today and in the time to come is our struggle for freedom.
Thank you. Now, on behalf of the Left Group, Martin Schildewan.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Prime Minister Orban, it was a great mistake to give you the Council presidency. You prove that every day, unfortunately, through your policies. I'm not just referring to your what you said about Trump or Putin, which was unfortunate PR. I leave that to you, but what I'm concerned about politically, colleagues, is the political attacks of your government on trade unions and employee rights. You are lining up with all those people who have a neoliberal agenda and support big companies, tax reforms for the rich and to the disadvantage of employees, worse support for the unemployed and pensioners and cuts to public benefits. That is your political signature when it comes to your own population. You've started a brutal austerity policy, even though your country has been getting billions from the Europe you hate. I don't wonder where the money is going other than to your business partners. Under your government, Hungary has become the most corrupt country in the European Union. And for this antisocial policy, to implement that and to cover up the corruption in the country, refugees become scapegoats and their rights have been limited. Colleagues, every year in Budapest we see the biggest Nazi demonstration march in Europe. Seems that you don't see that as a crime against humanity. As an anti-fascist, I disagree with that. As a Democrat, I call on the German anti-fascists like Marie T, who is in a Hungarian prison, is returned to Germany, and there should be a stop on deportations to Hungary. And when it comes to your illiberal democracy, the independence of the judiciary and press freedom, those rights have been systematically eroded, and those who suffer from this anti-democratic policy are the Hungarians themselves, your own population. Jean-Claude Juncker talked about a small tin pot dictator. I think he was right. Anti-democrats shouldn't be put at the head of democratic institutions. So I stick to the position you should never have been able to assume the Council presidency. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now, René Aust for the ESN Group.
Hungary has shown in recent years through its decisive action that again and again it is prepared to assume responsibility for itself and for the whole of Europe. In fact, already many years ago, Mr. Orban showed himself as one of the first heads of European state and government to meet the challenge of migration. While many people were cheering at migration since 2015, Hungary decided to act decisively against it. And in the Ukraine conflict, we've seen Viktor Orbán, who's prepared to take courageous steps and apply the strategy of diplomacy. And now, surprisingly enough, we're hearing more and more from Germany that they want to turn to diplomacy. It's time to show the respect to Viktor Orbán and the Hungarian people, the respect that they deserve. And you're not doing that. It is high time to show constructive cooperation with this EU presidency. We need to work on improving our competitiveness, and he has put that front and centre in his programme. We support you in this. Prime Minister, let us build a Europe together in which free national member states can work for the benefit of the whole of the continent. Let us work with sovereign European states and build on that. And I wish you every success for the second half of your presidency.
Thank you. So now I give the floor back to Prime Minister Orban.
Thank you very much to all of the speakers who've taken the floor. I would have been happy to talk to you about the programme of our presidency that I presented, but I can see that you're not interested in that. You'd like to organise a party political intifada here. Now, all of these left-wing lies about Hungary, I think is pure political propaganda. You're parliamentary members of parliament, and if you want to do that, then you can do so. But I was quite surprised at what I heard from the President of the Commission, because there are undoubtedly differences of opinion between Hungary and the European Commission. That's clear. And I deliberately didn't raise these, given the fact that as a presidency we are working on Europe's behalf, for Europe. And I don't think it's right to talk about these differences of opinion when we're here discussing the Hungarian presidency. That's not right. And unfortunately, it wasn't like this before. A former president of the Commission would never have said that. That never would have happened before. In the past, as the treaty says, the Commission is the guardian of the treaties. It was a neutral body, and its job was to be the guardian of these treaties. It was to put political debates to one side and deal with differences in a legal manner. But this is now changed, and rather than being a guardian of the treaties, it's a political body, a political weapon that you want to attack patriots in Europe and people in the Patriots for Europe party group. Now, I intentionally left out Hungary from my presentation, but if you want to speak about it, I'll talk about it. I fully reject what you said, President of the Commission. Any comparison with what freedom fighters did in 1956 was a mistake, and it has nothing to do with what happened in 1956, what's going on in Ukraine now. It's a complete mistake to make a comparison between those two things. On behalf of... And I reject any comparison with the freedom fighters from 1956. But I would like to say something which is common in English, but I can see is not accepted here. The English press says if you want to win, you need to be courageous enough to recognise that you may lose, because we are facing loss on the Ukrainian front. But the reality is, thanks to the President of the Commission as well, the European Union has a mistaken policy when it comes to this war. If we want to win, then we need to change this losing strategy that we are currently implementing. It was a poorly planned and poorly implemented strategy. If we continue on that route, we're going to lose. If we don't want Ukraine to lose, then we need to change strategy. And I think that you should consider that. In every war, there needs to be diplomatic work, we need to have communication, direct and indirect contacts. If we don't do that, then we will go even deeper into war, and the situation will be even more desperate. More and more people will die. Hundreds of thousands of people have died. Thousands of people are dying while we're talking here now. And with this strategy, we won't find any solution in the battlefield. So I think we need to stand up for peace. We need to focus on a ceasefire and create a different strategy, because otherwise we will all lose. I don't think it's fair for the President of the Commission to accuse Hungary that we just allowed people smugglers. No, that's not true. It arrests people smugglers, and after a period of time they are expelled from the country. And if they return, they have to stay in prison twice as long. We have saved Europe from more than 2,000 people smugglers. We should be recognised for that rather than criticised. Several people spoke about European unity, Mr. Weber as well. We believe in unity and diversity. We are never going to accept that European unity means that you tell us what to do and that we should keep quiet if we don't like something. That's not what European unity is. The people have to just keep quiet if they do not agree with the majority or with the Commission. In Hungary, in Parliament, the governing parties have a two-thirds majority, but we never would have seen there what you did here today. We may have a two-thirds majority, but all parties in the opposition all received posts in committees that they deserve. But you stop the patriots from having those posts, and then you want to lecture us about democracy. That's just incredible. Mr. Weber said that nobody talks to us. Well, that's an insult to those people who have spoken to us. In preparing the presidency, I saw the German Chancellor, I saw the French President in France, and I went to Rome as well. Are these nobody? And it's unfortunate that the leader of the EPP is not telling the truth. He says that the Hungarian governing party did not win the European elections in Hungary. We got 45%. You got 30% in Germany, so who won? And you made personal comments, so I'd like to make some. Anger is not good. We know what the conflict is between us. In 2018, this is one of the key reasons why you couldn't be head of the Commission. I supported you, and I promised that I would support you. But then you said that you do not want to become President of the Commission with the votes from Hungarians, and you didn't become the President, and that's why you're angry with me. You want to be sitting there where Mr. von der Leyen is sitting, and because of me you're not able to be there, and you're angry with me. But I can't do anything about that. I'm sorry that you've become a Hungarophobic person. I can't do anything about that. And please do not focus on personal insults rather than on a debate about European issues. Now, Ms. Beres, I think that lack of knowledge is not a good place in a debate. Apparently, we have high taxes in Hungary. We have a 15% flat rate income tax. And we have the economic growth in Hungary is twice that of the average in the EU. And then you talk about the bad figures in Hungary. Are the facts not important to you? And I can see that the member from France, from Renew, does not like the Hungarian constitutional system. You have to accept that we have the right to our own constitution. You say that we discriminate against certain groups based on their lifestyle. That's not the case. The Hungarian constitution allows everybody the right to the way they live their life. And you may not like that, but that's how it will stay. Our constitution will defend families. The Hungarian constitutional protects marriage, children, and in our constitution it says that marriage is between a man and a woman, and it also says that that father is a man and mother is a woman. You cannot debate me on that.
Now,
the accusations on corruption, I have to reject those. Now, we could go in this debate where we exchange personal remarks, because I think this body has some expertise when it comes to corruption. And that body wants to talk about corruption in any member state. Are you serious? One of the group leaders said huge numbers of people are leaving Hungary. That's simply not true. There is many people living, Hungarians working abroad as Austrians, proportionately. That's a false perception, and it's propaganda. Now, on EU money, I would just like to say that we all know that the money, EU support, comes to Hungary, 80% of that goes back to you. 80% is into the pockets of your companies. And then you want to criticize us because we accept EU funding. Is that logical? And the representatives from the left, well, you're saying that we are against trade unions. Why? No, we come to agreements with trade unions. We have recently agreed on a multi-annual wage increase programme, and hopefully we will also come to more such agreements in the coming years. I didn't bring the word Nazi into this debate. You did. Anti-fascist was mentioned. But a German citizen who came to Hungary and in the street attacked people walking in that street and caused significant injuries because he didn't like how those people looked. That is what Nazism is. You can't attack people in the streets in Hungary for those reasons, and then you come to the European Parliament and say, come, please allow someone out of prison because they attacked people on the streets and assaulted people. And I don't think you can ask me to allow people who've committed crimes out of Hungarian prisons. The President of the Commission talked about how many Russian people are working in Hungary. I think this is a case of hypocrisy. In Hungary, there are 3,000 working. We gave out 3,000 permits last year. Altogether, there are 7,000 working. Ms. von der Leyen is from Germany. What about Germany? What's the situation like there? There are 300,000 working in Germany. And they're from Russia. And then you accuse me? Ms. Perez, in Spain, there are 100,000 Russians working in Hungary, and then you make an accusation against me. In France, 60,000 Russians working there, and then you criticize Hungary, where we have 7,000. Is that fair? And on economic relations, Hungary trades in a transparent manner. But what about your countries? You can see there are many countries from where you have come, via Asia, circumvent sanctions and trade with Russia. I'll give you some figures. Every month, the European Union exports $1 billion more to certain Central Asian countries than before the Russia-Ukraine war. And why? Because this is how the sanctions are circumvented. German, French, Spanish companies are avoiding sanctions by doing this. You also mentioned energy. Western countries, you, since the outbreak of the war, have bought Turkish and Indian, from Indian refineries, oil to the tune of 8.5 billion euros. 8.5 billion euros. This is hypocrisy. In 2023, you Western countries bought 44% more crude oil from Russia than before. The tax revenue from these companies went into the Russian coffers, and then you accuse us of friendship with Russia. You are funding them. The truth is, I didn't come here to read out these facts to you. I had no intention to do that. I came here to present the programme of the Hungarian presidency, and I would have liked to have said that there are problems. I would have liked to have said to the group leaders that there is competitiveness problems, migration is a problem, we need to change, and the Hungarian presidency has some ideas, and we'd like the Parliament to support us in that. That's why I came here today. But then you have decided to turn it into a party political clash, and I think that's very unfortunate. If you attack us, I will defend my country. Thank you.
So I give the floor next to Peter Magyar. 5 minutes.
Madam President, President of the Commission, members of the European Parliament, few questions, and on behalf of millions of Hungarians. I hope that now you can explain to Europe, but particularly to Hungarians, how Hungary has ended up in this situation. How has Hungary in 20 years gone from a bright star to what is officially the poorest and most corrupt country in the European Union? How has the Orban-Gyurcsány period become 2 decades of missed opportunities? Prime Minister, for 14 years you have been leading our country with unrestricted mandate. You had all opportunities to make Hungary a land of kept promises. For centuries, our ancestors have fought for Hungary's freedom and sovereignty, and they fought for Europe, for Hungary to belong in Europe. The overwhelming majority of Hungarians voted in favour of joining NATO and the EU, and if there were a referendum today, they would do the same. Prime Minister, we are members of the European and Western Club. Even if you want to fantasize about economic neutrality, even if you'd rather talk about changing the global system than the real problems of the Hungarian people. Prime Minister, we agree that external borders need protecting, and we agree that it's necessary to take resolute action to combat illegal migration, but if you want to fight for this, then why did you allow 2,000 people smugglers out of Hungarian prisons? Why do you give residence bonds to your oligarchs to the tune of 10 billion forints? Why did you want to, in secret, build a camp for 500 migrants to the tune of 5 billion forints near the Austrian border? And please don't blame Brussels for that. Be honest. And yes, both parties need to work to conclude the Russia-Ukraine war as soon as possible. and at least come to a ceasefire. But that does not mean that the opinion of your political director is acceptable. He said that Ukraine should not have fought for its territorial sovereignty. Prime Minister, the foundation of Hungarian independence, sovereignty and constitutionality is the legacy of our 1956 heroes. And your advisor defiled this legacy when he said that we learned from the 1956 revolution that that it's not possible, that we should not resist the attacks of a foreign power because that can cost lives. Prime Minister, this is called treason. We also agree that the most important foundation of our nation is the family, and that it's important to develop the wonderful Hungarian countryside. But in the summer, we've seen a paedophile scandal, and we haven't seen as so few babies born in Hungary as in 60 years. The minimum wage is €70 a month. We are moving towards a demographic catastrophe. More than 1 million Hungarians have been forced to earn a living in Western Europe. Tens of thousands of Hungarian children are now born in London, Paris, Vienna or Brussels, and rather than working to bring hundreds of thousands of Hungarians back home, you decide to bring in 60,000 Asian economic migrants without asking the Hungarian people. You have abandoned the Hungarian countryside. One by one you are closing railways, maternity wards in rural areas, post offices. The Hungarian countryside is emptying out, and every other 18-year-old young person in Hungary is thinking of leaving Hungary. Prime Minister, the average age of a Hungarian train is 45. Locomotives are catching fire. The gears aren't working. The trains are late. And your minister, 2 years ago, stopped all railway developments. And what about health? 1 in 3 Hungarian men die before their 65th birthday. There is a lack of 40,000 nurses in the system. There's no detergent, disinfectant, no toilet paper in the hospitals. And this is in the home of Ignaz Semmelweis. And in the summer, when you were enjoying a luxury holiday, there were wards where it was 40 degrees. And education as well. For years, the indicators, international indicators, according to those, Hungarian education has got worse. And then also there's the issue with Erasmus. You have increased ministers' salaries by 30%, but what about other people? For example, social workers, civil servants, they are working far less money. The minimum wage in Hungary is €668, Slovenia €1,253, Poland €1,000. In Romania, they've increased wages fivefold, and the food is 20–30% lower. What about also 27% VAT in Hungary and more expensive gas and electricity costs as well? Why did you spend all of this? What about all of the public utilities? We all know that the end is nigh and the sea has revolted. Whatever you threaten, millions of Hungarians, brick by brick, step by step, will be taking back our home, and we will build a peaceful, European and livable Hungary. And I'd like to end with the words of Pope John Paul II. We should not give up hope. You should not doubt. You should not become tired. You should not lose your courage. Do not be afraid. Prime Minister, we are not afraid, and we are working to achieve our goals. Thank you.
I give the floor next to Ms. Klara Dobrev with a general appeal for time to be kept.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Well, I can say, Prime Minister, that it was very embarrassing. It was very embarrassing to hear you try to explain things, but there's one thing that you are right about. European citizens and European policy and European Parliament are not interested in the Hungarian presidency's programme because they don't take it seriously. We've heard so many cliches and so many lies that now we know what you're like. We've learned what you are like from recent years. But it is my duty sometimes to listen to Orban speeches. It's not always easy. And I've seen over the past few years that you've consistently moved away from the truth. You face these kind of false opponents. The biggest problem is this is a problem for Hungary. And now you deal with these imagined opponents, but then in these Orban speeches, there is one thing that is always missing, and that is people, everyday people and their problems. Because quite simply, you don't care about that. But it's these, because a country depends on the everyday lives of its people. But you never talk about these. You never talk about the tens of thousands of people who have a knot in their stomachs and are anxious when they go to hospital because they hope that they'll be able to make it out. And looking at the conditions of the hospitals in Hungary as well. Simply, you don't deal with those issues. But in recent years, Hungarians do not have a worse standard of living. One of the poorest countries in Europe under the Orban government, because there is some kind of international secret conspiracy. That's not true. It's also not true that it's specific to Hungary. It's because you govern badly, and you govern badly because you don't care about these things, you don't deal with them, so there's no way that you'll be able to govern properly. And obviously this begs the question, should the Prime Minister not make people's everyday lives better? If he's not doing that, what's he actually doing? There's some things that he does deal with very intensively. In the Hungarian Parliament, you can't say this because the Fidesz Speaker of the House takes the floor off you. But what Orban does on a regular basis is how he can sell off our country and European values to the interests of Russian oligarchs. That's where he applies his veto. And then to Putin as well. We have the only country that has increased the number of Russian imports, all funded by Putin. And I am very clear that they do not have any access to the foreign ministry or the intelligence agencies, because that's what's happening in Hungary. We're seeing hacking attacks on our foreign agency. And we are looking forward to the end of this Hungarian presidency, but everybody has one question. So many prime ministers have met with Putin, but none of them have become a loyal servant of Putin. I'd like you to say, everyone's asked this, how are the Russians blackmailing you? Thank you.
I give the floor next to Tamás Deutsch. 1 minute.
Pár perce itt a néppárti Magyar Péter szerepelt.
Minutes ago, Péter Magyar from the EPP spoke. Magyar is in trouble mentally as well because, according to him, he wiretapped his own wife, and also recordings were made to blackmail. This is not something that normal people do. In a decent society, these people would not form political alliances. He has mental problems because Emotionally and mentally, he has abused his ex-wife and his partner. And this is a textbook example of domestic violence. But also legally, he has problems because he committed a crime. At a nightclub, there were recordings that were taken where he was violent against somebody. He stole that person's phone and then threw that phone in the Danube. Peter Magyar is in trouble because he behaves aggressively, and therefore he wants to hide behind the immunity of the Parliament. And I hope that that this does not happen.
Beneath this Parliament, Adam Bielan, 1.5 minutes.
Madam President, Prime Minister, ladies and gentlemen, you can see what poor condition the European Union is in, because even President Macron is warning us against its death. Our economy, due to climate ideology, is being degraded all the time. The Green Deal, the anti-democratic centralization pressure, make the standard of living go down. This requires a fundamental change. That is why it is very good that one of the top priorities of the Hungarian presidency is restructuring the competitiveness of our economy. A review of the climate politics, deregulation, increasing productivity and innovation is a necessity. Going back to common sense is also needed in other areas deemed as priority areas by the Hungarian presidency. EU agriculture needs to be perceived as the guarantor of our food security and not be treated as a burden causing more CO2 emissions. The cohesion policy needs to remain an instrument equalizing the differences between poorer and richer areas in the EU. Russia's aggression on Ukraine has proved that we need to immediately increase our expenditure on defense and production in that area. But strategic autonomy will not provide us with that, but a strict alliance with the USA and NATO. Ms. von der Leyen has said many words about not being dependent on Russia for fossil fuels, but we remember who built Nord Stream. It was subsequent German governments where Ms. von der Leyen used to be minister for many years. Without that, we wouldn't have the war in Ukraine and so many victims.
2 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Mr. Commissioner, Prime Minister, colleagues. I have a confession to make. I sometimes watch bad movies, and one of them is Austin Powers. And I've seen it several times, and I'm sure, Mr. Orban, you've seen it even more times than I do. After all, you're in it. No, not as Dr. Evil, who could easily be based on Mr. Putin or Donald Trump. No, more like the infamous Mini-Me, who looks, talks and acts exactly like Dr. Evil, but just sits on his lap. Real life, however, is not a bad movie. Your behavior is already a bad reality for a vast majority of Hungarians. And now you want to do the same in the rest of Europe, together with your so-called friends, your small army of mini-me's. What would your European Project 2025 mean for ordinary Europeans? That the Dutch should also bribe a doctor with cash in order to be treated? That the Austrians' hard-earned tax money is also spent on fake projects for the benefit of the Prime Minister's family and friends? That a majority of young French people will want to leave the country, just as is the case now in Hungary, and that the entire EU suffers from the same superinflation as Hungary did last year? Not one sensible European would wish for their own country what your incompetence has done to the brave and good people of Hungary. You know all this, and you're so insecure and embarrassed about it that you rig your elections and silence the free press. We will not allow your Project 2025 to succeed. We will defend liberty, prosperity and security against your blatantly paranoid attacks, and we will do it all over Europe. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Tineke Strik, 1.5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, Commissioner. Our House of Democracy just served as a platform for the propaganda of Prime Minister Orban, because the truth doesn't serve his interests. The truth is that he's a corrupt, disloyal and ruthless violator of the EU's most fundamental values. Instead of listening to him, we should give the microphone to the Hungarian people, who face the daily hardship of living under his autocracy. The teachers, the judges, human rights defenders, journalists and academics who fight for the values that the EU stands for, who simply demand the same freedoms and protection as every EU citizen. Yet this man is punishing them with smear campaigns and intimidating investigations. However, a solid majority in this House defends our allies and genuinely joins forces. And we urge the Council and Commission, go all in with our response, just like Orban does with his destruction. This presidency fails to meet its duty to hold a hearing under Article 7, paragraph 1. We urge the Council to use Article 7, paragraph 2, and prevent Orban from hijacking EU decision-making. And the Commission to keep EU funding frozen until the rule of law is restored for real. Be consistent, credible, and act with urgency. If we cannot protect our EU citizens against autocrats, our EU democracy is bound to fail.
Thank you. Next, Ilaria Salis, 2 minutes.
Thank you, President. Dear colleagues, I know Hungary from its darkest place, from prison. I was held in pre-trial detention in harsh conditions for 15 months. Thanks to the solidarity of thousands of anti-fascist citizens, I stand in front of you today as a free woman. The presidency of this Hungarian government is highly inappropriate. United Europe was born on the ashes of the defeat of Nazi fascism as a project of international cooperation. And it's a bitter paradox to have a presidency led by someone whose goal is to dismantle the EU in the name of nationalism. Hungary, under Viktor Orban, has become an illiberal and oligarchic regime, an authoritarian ethnic state. Some even call it a modern tyranny. What is sure is that now the rule of law and media freedoms are not guaranteed. Dissent is criminalized. Civil society repressed. While loyal oligarchs have grown rich, social and regional inequalities have become worse. The rights of minorities are violated and racism has become mainstream. The EU is far from being perfect. Neoliberal policies, social inequalities, double standards in foreign policy and subordination to the US influence. But none of this concerns Mr. Orban. His real targets are minorities, migrants, social justice, freedom of expression and the rule of law. He fuels resentment among the Hungarian people against the so-called degenerate Europe to create an external enemy and consolidate his own power. Mr. Orban has strong ties with the worst far-right forces, both in Europe and internationally. This new dangerous form of fascism represents the authoritarian variant of today's global capitalism. They are fraudulent enemies of the working class and of friendship among people, a threat to those who aspire to live in freedom. Finally, I want to express my full solidarity with Maya, the German anti-fascist and non-binary activist who was extradited from Germany and now detained in Hungary. European democracy must stand firm and refuse to cooperate with Mr. Orban's oppressive and authoritarian regime. Thank you.
Okay, wait. Ms. Salis, wait. There is a blue card. Will you take it? You don't take it? Okay. I give the floor next to Zsuzsanna Borvendeg.
Istennel a hazáért és a szabadságért. Így hangzott egyik szabadságunk
God protect Hungary and freedom. And this is a Hungarian virtue. We are fighting to combat the anti-democratic attacks by the European Union. You're punishing us. You're not paying out the funds that we are owed. And you even wanted to boycott the program of the Hungarian presidency, despite the fact that it concentrates on very important issues. And our competitiveness and our situation in the farming sector are critical. But the citizens have shown what they think in recent elections. We don't want to see the suicidal green agenda and the gender ideology and the craziness surrounding the war. You serve the interests of the global financial elite. If you follow the Hungarian example, you could move Europe away from destruction. We are fighting for the people, and this is why I'd like to ask the Prime Minister of Hungary to resist pressure and to ensure that in Hungary there won't be a migrant camp. Thank you.
Vážená pani predsedníčka, vážení kolegovia,
Madam President, colleagues, Mr. Orban, I don't need a friend who changed if I changed. I have my shadow, which does it a lot better. We also need a decent friend. That is what Plutarch said. And a decent friend, we see him in the mirror. We don't always like what we see in the mirror. We're all people, and we all make mistakes. But I disagree on many things with Mr. Orban, but democracy is about differences of opinions. Otherwise, we'd have a dictatorship. Since the times of Thomas Hexy in 1397, we know that what freedom of expression in a parliament is. But have we talked about freedom of expression here after such a speech? Viktor Orban had different opinions on many things than us. These differences came out in his speech, but it is his free choice and his divine right. We should convince him that he can make mistakes sometimes. But we don't find out Mr. Orban's opinions if we don't give him freedom of expression. If we, for this reason, we deny communication with the Hungarians because of the person of Mr. Orban, I think that's the wrong approach. It shows that our arguments are weak. We can see a lot about the representatives of Europe.
President, Commissioner, Prime Minister, the presidency of the Council comes with both great opportunity and great responsibility. And Prime Minister, you say that you want to discuss the political priorities of the Hungarian presidency. For example, you say that you want to reinforce European defence, you want to regain control of the external border. I welcome these priorities. The problem is that you and your government act in the opposite way. Instead of focusing on strengthening the defence of Europe, you went to Moscow to shake hands with Putin, the man who wants nothing else than to destroy Europe. He is the man who has launched a war of aggression against your own neighbour, Ukraine. And instead of ensuring a strong external border and increasing the internal security of the Schengen area, your government have decided to make it easier for potential Russian spies and saboteurs to access the Union. That is the truth of what is happening. We have no problem to discuss your priorities, but I would argue that the citizens of Hungary and Europe deserve better. And trust me, change is coming, also to Hungary with the TISA party. Get ready.
Thank you. Next, Camilla Lauretti. Un minuto.
Grazie Presidente, sono I valori comuni la base su cui è stata costruita l'Unione.
The European Union has been built on common values, and you, Prime Minister Orban, are questioning those as well. And I think that would lead to the end of Europe, not changing Europe as you claim. Looking at migrants in Brussels as people who you can exploit to get money out of them is not really the way of doing things. You have a retrograde view of many things. We see populism and a denial of rights, which you're enforcing. And we've seen the case of support for Ukraine. You actually visited Putin and Trump. That's the way that you're exploiting your role as a premier. You're actually undermining justice, promoting corruption, and working against the fourth estate as well and damaging the interests of the Union. That is not being consistent in Europe, but we will continue to denounce the danger that you present to Europe. So we should look at the work for the nations rather than against the community.
Madam President, Prime Minister, for years you've been defending the rights of sovereignty, a Europe of nations and cooperation, and you're constantly being opposed. We don't want to see our countries displaced by a centralist EU. Many initiatives allowed us to start the group of the Patriots for Europe and the third force in this parliament, despite the anti-democratic cordon, and that this opposition is collapsing. We want to have controls on the internal borders, even in Germany, Ms. von der Leyen. The sacrosanct principle of freedom of movement will give way. Hungary is being accused of inferences in his policies. I would like to welcome the priorities that you give Prime Minister of a cause which should bring us together here, which is peace. How many times have I heard here warmongering speeches from European representatives who want to have long-range missiles fired into Russia, and that would lead us to total war. In this context, you are presiding over the Council of the EU. It's a big opportunity for Europe and for all of us. Faced with aggression and all the lies from Ms. Hayer here, amongst others, you can count on our support to carry out the political fight, which is democracy and peace.
And now,
Carlo Fidanza for a minute and a half.
Thank
you, President, Prime Minister, ladies and gentlemen. I was listening to your presidency programme attentively, and with the respect that I think is right to you and the Hungarian people who have entrusted you with governing their country for many years. And I think that respect has been lacking here in this chamber. But when we're talking about patriotism and the lectures from the left, of course we appreciate the rule of law, but we're getting somebody lecturing to us from the left who actually has attacked and been accused of grievous bodily harm against citizens on the street and didn't have the courteousness to listen to a question that we wanted to put to her. So, of course, we share agreements with our friends, not because of the points on Russia and Ukraine. We don't see you as a danger. Obviously, we need to know your personal history to know that that is not a risk that we run in trusting you. But we need to work together to try and find a fair peace for Ukraine. In 2011, I remember your first historic presidency. We had the financial downturn, and I remember that you used two words which are simple but very powerful: strong Europe. So over the past 13 years, we've seen a lot of shocks, and we know that Europe is not necessarily stronger, it's actually weaker. So we hope that this last phase of the Hungarian presidency will lead to specific, concrete steps in the right direction to support the economy, strong because you're being determined in defending our borders, stronger because we're more courageous to defend our own history.
President Vilmez, 2 minutes.
Thank you, President, Prime Minister, Mr. Commissioner. What is the rule of law? In simple terms, is a principle that law constrains authority, therefore protecting our rights and civil liberties from any kind of abuses of power. Rule of law is obviously not your cup of tea, Mr. Prime Minister. Just take a look at the Rule of Law annual report. And let's not also forget, when I was sitting next to you at the Council in 2020, that you blocked at length the introduction of the conditionality regulation to protect the EU budget. It is also not the forte of the Hungarian presidency, as you demonstrated by the space dedicated to rule of law in your programme, one paragraph out of 44 pages. And this space is used to complain that the toolbox does not allow checks on the EU institutions themselves. Perhaps trying to cast suspicion elsewhere to divert attention from your own track records. Rule of law is indeed not your forte, but a value that your government consciously and repeatedly undermines to gain more power. No later than yesterday, we at Renew met Hungarian academics and media professionals, not yours, the independent ones. Their testimonies were appalling and very courageous, as many of them live now under extreme pressure, to say the least. So, as Renew, and with the help of other Democrats in the Assembly and beyond, we will keep working on what your presidency and government tries to avoid. We will keep working to make sure that the rule of law toll books more coherent, more efficient and more binding. We will keep working on them to make sure that your government and any other one who wish to follow your lead in Europe will be held really accountable for their action. We will keep working because we know that, unfortunately, your presidency legacy will be summed up by your attempts to put migrants in special convoys to Brussels and a handshake with President Putin. Thank you.
I give the floor next to Martin Stakis. 1 minute.
Madam President, dear colleagues, today the people of Ukraine are showing incredible bravery in the face of brutal aggression. Hungary, like Ukraine, Latvia and other nations, have suffered under the oppressive occupation of the Soviet Union, an evil empire that once dominated its neighbours. The same evil has been reborn in Russia. Nations that remember this history are standing firmly with Ukraine. However, Hungary vetoes and crucial support for Ukraine, and your alliance with Putin, Mr. Orban, is weakening Europe's response. Mr. Orban, you value your unequal friendship with war criminal Putin over supporting Ukrainian people. Or perhaps you agree with your advisor's remarks, calling resistance to Russia irresponsible. Ukraine's fight is about protecting the security and values of all Europe. The EU must stand firm in its support of Ukraine and Mr. Orban, you must decide which side of history you want to be on.
Thank you. Next, Konstantinos Arvanitis, 1 minute.
Thank you very much. Madam President, Mr. Orban, your slogan is Make Europe Great Again. The problem is how you understand Europe, whilst your political narrative is inspired by the narratives of Trump and Putin. When it comes to the migration problem and the anti-fascist battle, there is a song about the anti-fascist fight. You exclude everything which is with your the way you pursue migrants and minorities and constant infringement of the rule of law. This vision of the founding fathers of Europe, that is something which we in the left are against, because we have been, otherwise we're condemned to a constant conflict. And that says progress and democracy against authoritarianism.
Pani prezidentka Leyenová, priority maďarského predsedníctva, ktoré tu boli predstavené, považujem za rozumné a musím povedať, že
presidency program is very good, I think. Listening to the nonsense that we heard from Ms. von der Leyen, it's actually refreshing here in the European Parliament finally to hear the voice of reason. Ms. von der Leyen, you should be inspired by Hungary and not try and punish Hungary, because Europe doesn't want more war, more migrants, more rainbow agenda. We need politicians and leaders who are fighting for peace and for the welfare of Europe. I appreciate Mr. Orban's actions because he is the only person who dared stand up against Ms. von der Leyen's candidacy. Unfortunately, the Slovak government didn't do that. We would have supported them in that. So I'd like to support the Prime Minister in what he's doing.
I give the floor
yes, send the migrants to Brussels.
Frau Präsidentin,
Madam President,
Minister President Ur,
Prime Minister Orban, you don't have to find everything good which has happened in civil society in Hungary in recent years, and I can't judge that. We've seen enough politicking recently. I think making deductions from that about the Council presidency is infuriating. To think, Mr. Weber, that you're right anyway and the other one isn't. That isn't democratic. What should the people of Europe think of us here? We think that we're not quite right. Nobody has to teach lessons to Hungary in this House when it comes to democracy, and we need to look back into history. And 1956, the last time was when the Hungarians made a hole in the Iron Wall. It led to the fall of that wall. When it comes to Ukraine, in the Hungarian presidency, we can tear down a curtain of politicians who don't want to have a victory over ideology.
Murasan, 1.5 minutes.
Madam President, thank you, Prime Minister. Dear colleagues, we're here to discuss the Hungarian Council Presidency, the relations between the European Union and Hungary, and about European values. And the truth is, the Council Presidency is always an opportunity for a country to present its people, to present its traditions, to present its regions, and unfortunately the current Hungarian government is missing out on this opportunity. A Council Presidency is an opportunity also to deliver, and unfortunately this Council Presidency is not delivering. 13 years ago, the Hungarian Council Presidency had results, had achievements, Today, none. And let me say very clearly, this is the first Council presidency of an EU member state with 0 achievements. Today, unfortunately, Hungary is weaker and more isolated than ever, and this is the consequences of your decisions, Prime Minister. You're limiting and controlling media in Hungary. You're attacking opposition. You're attacking civil society. You're attacking the judiciary. You're attacking the free world, and you are defending dictators. Instead of working for the people of Hungary, this Hungarian government works for Vladimir Putin, and this is something that concerns us all. Hungary is losing opportunities. While inflation was 6% in Europe, it was 18% in Hungary. When it was 10% in Europe, it was 28% in Hungary. Deficit is 3% in Europe, it is 6% in Hungary, and we have European funds available for the people of Hungary, and we're sorry to see the people of Hungary missing out on this opportunity due to the actions of this government. The current Hungarian government is an obstacle in the desire of the European Union to help the people of Hungary. This is why we have to conclude that this government is unfortunately bad for Europe, it is bad for Hungary and bad for the people of Hungary. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I give the floor to Ana Catarina Mendes, 1 minute.
Muito obrigada, Sra. Presidente, Sr. Primeiro-Ministro, caros colegas. Eu, felizmente, cresci numa Europa dos valores, na Europa da solidariedade, da paz, da justiça e das liberdades. E hoje o que eu esperava era que quem exerce a presidência do Conselho Europeu pudesse aqui dizer-nos que a sua visão sobre a imigração mudou, que os migrantes não são um veneno. O discurso do ódio só enfraquece esta manhã. Essa não é a Europa
and that we wouldn't have more hate speech. That isn't the Europe we want. It isn't the Europe that the great thinkers Schuman and Monnet thought of. Your migration policy deserves to be rejected. We can't lie anymore and have had hate speeches about migrants. Those who seek refuge in Europe, what you have contributed to Europe is a discourse that causes divisions every day. It is against what this House of Democracy stands for. We don't want to have your vision of Europe, Mr. Orban.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Prime Minister, how many Europeans voted for Ms. von der Leyen? She comes here, insults Hungary, and then goes. She's left. And, you know, what about all those people here who supported von der Leyen? What does this say about it? It's not a home of democracy. It's a home of hypocrisy. And this is, we've seen a rise in populist governments across Europe. In Spain, we have seen the PP and the PSOE come together to talk about the allocation of judges. But let's talk about Hungary. People talk about Hungary being an ally of Putin, but then Sanchez is buying gas from Russia like there were no tomorrow. And then dependence on China, jobs going there, companies going there. But no, the problem, of course, is Hungary. And what about the wife and sister of the Prime Minister in Spain who are being investigated for corruption? But no, the problem is Hungary. Mr. Orban's speech is a breath of fresh air in this Parliament. Protecting the innocence of children, securing the borders, preventing mass migration, lowering taxes, defending families, the principle of subsidiarity, cooperation involving local communities and companies' competitiveness. Yes, and women are safer in Budapest in the streets than in Brussels, in Paris, in Berlin, in London, unfortunately in Madrid. And if you were not so sectarian, then perhaps we would see Hungary's government as a way of making a better life. Thank you.
Kaiser, 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam President. The Hungarian presidency has been criticised without it was started on the 1st of July. even in this Parliament. Then Prime Minister Orban has been criticised for his efforts and initiatives for a negotiated peace of the Ukraine conflict. I can only congratulate him for this courageousness. We need a dialogue with all the belligerents to put an end to this war as quickly as we can. A Council presidency should also have the freedom to fight for peace. At the same time, I refuse the attempts launched by the European Commission to weaken the Hungarian presidency. The Commission is no longer the guardian of the presidencies, as you said, Prime Minister. It is not a state, it is an administration at the service of the member states. It shouldn't organise parallel meetings with those of the presidency. The powers of the Commission are those that have been accorded to it by the member states. If it thinks that it is superior to that, the member states should withdraw those powers at the next revision of the treaties. Thank you.
Give the floor next to Moritz Kerner. 1 minute.
What a speech, Mr. Orban. What a speech. You say you want democracy, and you brag about your majorities in the Hungarian parliament. Yet since years, you only rule by emergency decree. Are you so afraid of democracy, Mr. Orban? You say you are for national sovereignty, yet you invite Chinese policemen to surveil the people in your country. You say you want to stop migration, yet you let Russian spies into our Schengen system and call it national card. That is what you're doing. Mr. Orban, you are not a patriot. You are just a useful idiot of Russia and China. That's the reality. You say you want to fight for more economic competitiveness, yet you keep introducing new company laws and taxes to drive European competitors out of your country. You turned Hungary into a banana republic. You robbed your population and enriched your family and friends. Under your rule, Hungary has become one of the poorest and officially the most corrupt country in the EU.
Thank you.
What a fraud. What a burden for your people. Mr. Orban, please step down to make Hungary great again.
Your time is up. Moritz, there's a blue card. Will you take it? Okay, I give the floor for a blue card to Ms. Roth-Nevedalova.
Thank you very much. Madam Chair, I understand that this is a discussion about the priorities of the Hungarian presidency, despite the fact that many of the speakers are speaking about their feelings and about the different facts, so they should be taken away the floor. But my question for Mr. Kerner is that, can you explain to me, please, how is it connected, the national discussion or national decisions of Hungarian Prime Minister or the Hungarian government with the presidency of the European Union, because this is, I didn't understand very much from your presentation. How is this correlated or connected? And you didn't very much speak about the presidency priorities, which I would like to hear finally somebody in this room to speak about, because this here is just the hearing of Mr. Prime Minister of Hungary and not the presidency discussion, which should be here. Thank you.
Mr. Kerner, you have 30 seconds to reply.
Thank you, colleague, for that question, because it's really good. Because it is connected. It should not be differentiated. If you are destroying the rule of law and European values in your country, if there's an Article 7 procedure in place and the rule of law conditionality applied to your country, that should make a difference. You should not make the school bully the school director, and that is what we did in the European Union. That is why this House called for the Council to change that. It could easily be done. We did it already. The Brits, they changed their Council presidency.
Kerner.
There should not be a Council presidency when a member state is violating our fundamental principles.
You have made
that is
point.
what
Thank
it is
you.
about.
Thank you, Mr. Kerner. I give the floor now to Daniel Freund. 1 minute.
Dear colleagues, dictator, the European Parliament is the beating heart of European democracy. And this Parliament is the arch enemy of autocrats like you. Mr. Orban, you're the most corrupt politician in the European Union. You and your cronies, you stole money on an insane scale. At least 14 billion euros that went to your country during your premiership have been lost. Who has ever stolen over 10,000 money transporters worth of EU funds? And the biggest trick you have played is that you distract people from your heist with hate against minorities, with propaganda about gender, with so-called peace initiatives. But this money was meant to fix roads, schools, and benefit the Hungarians. But instead, you build a football stadium in your backyard, you build palaces, and you have made your childhood friend Mecharos the richest man in Hungary. Mr. Orban, we want our money back. And to all of us, we have to stop this steal. No more EU funds for Hungary. Let's take his veto away and let's stop inviting him here to his parliament. Instead, there should be a European arrest warrant. Thank you.
Mr. Freund, you have a blue card. Will you take it from Ms. Shalabaros? No. Give me a second. Yeah, we need to give you...
Ich verstehe dies schon, aber ich stelle Ihnen...
Well, I do understand what you're saying, but the question is, why don't you deal with your own German Green government? They have spoken for uncontrolled migration to Germany. Why don't you talk about the terrible energy transition? That's been badly implemented by the Greens. Why is the powerful German car industry now threatened? Why are tens of thousands of jobs at risk? Now, you're not only dealing with Europe here, you also have to think about my home country. The Greens are leaving regional parliaments in Germany. They've had enough of you. You've got single-figure percentages in polls. Go home.
You have 30 seconds to respond.
Ich weiß nicht, ob Sie gemerkt haben, Herr Kollege.
Well, I don't know if you've noticed, colleagues, that we're actually sitting in the European Parliament here. One of our main tasks in the European Parliament is to ensure that EU money is spent properly. I said on the Budgetary Control Committee, the country where EU money is spent worst of all is your own home country. If you want a few examples, in front of the canteen there's a wonderful photo exhibition with the worst corruption cases of the last few years, carried out by the government of the party that you represent. You have to explain to the citizens of Hungary, where is all of that money? 45 billion has gone to Hungary since Orban became Prime Minister. Where is that money now?
Madam Chair, I'm speaking in Finnish, which is belongs in the same language family as Hungarian. I love Hungary. I have visited the country countless times, ever since when I was 12, our school class visited the city of Tata. I still know the Hungarian national anthem by heart. I have been to practically all the cities in Hungary, but every year I'm more and more saddened over the situation in Hungary when I see that Hungarians are starting to lose their belief in the future. More and more people have lost their hopefulness and joy. That has been replaced by gloom and nationalist distrust. Viktor Orban spoke here today, and during his reign he has dismantled rule of law, and at the same time he has directed the funds of Hungarians and of all of us into his own pockets and those of his family. And he has come up with scapegoats from other countries, from Hungary's own minorities and refugees. Mr. Orban is playing by the same rulebook as Mr. Putin, the far-right playbook. And it's no wonder that he wanted to end the green transition and become dependent on the oil states. He's no patriot. This must stop. Rule of law and democracy must not be up for negotiation.
Now, 1 minute, Eva Zajahojkowska-Hernik.
Viktor Orban really disturbs the elites represented by Ursula von der Leyen, who has just escaped from her seat. Maybe She is bored with democracy. Why is Orban an obstacle? Because he protects traditional values, he protects the borders of the EU from illegal immigrants. Mrs. von der Leyen and her elites, they are for the values that destroy the traditional model of the family. They destroy the sovereignty of national states. They are against children. They are against economy. It has to finish. Poland and Hungary should head a great coalition of the states that will reject those stupid ideas. Let us rebuild the Visegrad Group. Let us make Europe really great, strong, competitive and safe again. You can count on the Polish people. Let us reject this European superstate together.
Next to Andrzej Halicki, 1.5 minutes.
Szanowni Państwo,
Ladies and gentlemen, Prime Minister, I met Viktor Orban in the late 80s, 1980s. I was in Budapest twice as a leader of an independent student movement. Then he visited us in Warsaw, at the Warsaw University. And this is very important because I remember Viktor Orban as a true fighter for freedom and democracy. He understood what democracy and pluralism are. He knew that Russians can bring death and occupation, and that they are a threat to freedom and not the other way around. And I think that this Viktor Orban from my youth was the true one, the authentic one. I don't want to analyze what had happened, that he is so different today, and he is destroying liberty, pluralism, freedom of the media. The Hungarian television is not broadcasting this very important debate. This is the pluralism and freedom of media in Hungary. But what is important is freedom, because it's a common freedom. But I want to say that letting Belarusian and Russian agents into the EU is threatening our safety and security. Cooperation with Chinese police is something unimaginable if we remember about the student massacre in the Tiananmen Square. And saying that only bigger Europe can be safer, but without considering Moldovans or Ukrainians, is also something very strange. When you talk only about Serbia's aspirations, but not about the others. So I want to appeal to the Hungarians from here, because our relationship between our nations were always very close, and Orban was fascinated by Solidarity movement, and he wrote about it. We had a leader who wanted in Poland to create Budapest in Poland, but now I want to tell you that one day you should show your strength. We see you, we hear you, and you will have Warsaw in Budapest one day.
Thank you. Next, Helen Fritzon, 1 minute.
Fru talman!
Madam President, Hungary's presidency started with Viktor Orban shaking hands with Vladimir Putin. It's the same Viktor Orban who then told Ukraine to capitulate. Mr. Orban, this is a betrayal of the whole of Europe. It's a betrayal of our common values. This is a time when democracy is challenged by authoritarian leaders and far-right forces. And the EU has to be united. Ukraine's struggle is our struggle. My grandfather spoke about what happened in 1956 when the Swedes stood in the ports and welcomed Hungarian refugees. We stood up for you then, and now we stand up for Ukraine. Instead, Viktor Orban is playing into Putin's hands and is undermining the security for all of us. This is shameful for the whole of Europe. Thank you.
Card, would you like to take it, Hélène? Ms. Fritzon? Ms. Fritzon, there's a blue card. Would you like to take it? All right. So we go next to Klára Dostálová. 1 minute.
Mrs. Reintke from the Greens does not have the right to say who is welcome in the European Parliament and who is not. I very much welcome you, Prime Minister, and just as you, I expected a completely different debate. And that is why I would like to call upon all of you to come back to our values. The EU's motto is united in diversity, and it should foster unity, not division. Hungary's presidency has the motto "Make Europe Great Again," and it reminded us that Europe can and must be a global player. The symbol of the Rubik's Cube is a brilliant invention that, like Europe, is complex but always has a solution. It shows us that while each nation has its own priorities, we can be united, and now we have to build bridges, not walls. Hungary is not a problem. Hungary is a partner offering solutions and deserving respect. Europe divided in opinions can still be strong, but Europe divided in spirit has no chance to succeed. Thank you.
Κύριε Όρμπαν, δεν θα ασκήσω στήρα κριτική.
Mr. Orban, I won't want to criticize too much at this point. I see which politicians mean it well for the European Union, so protection of the family, of farmers, of battling illegal migration. You can see which policies would be good. So for the sovereign nations, we want a union which is based upon national and religious foundations, a geopolitical centre of which we can all be proud. As Mrs. Meloni said, there are politicians who are undermining fundamental principles in Europe. So Cyprus has been, for example, occupied for decades, and there we must essentially push our national interests to the fore, because Cyprus is a victim of a barbaric invasion and occupation for many, many years. And finally, I would like to say that
I give the floor next to
you have forgotten Cyprus once again.
We have seen a show from someone who wants to hide the dramatic reality of this regime. He's spoken about values, but he simply treads on the European Charter of Fundamental Rights. Europe is nervous about sending money to Hungarian citizens because they're worried that the money will end up in the pockets of a dictator. Mussolini and Hitler showed the path in the fast. It seems that some people are happy to use fascist salutes, including some Italian leaders. Europe is a union of values. We will defend it. Because Cerula Ilies, a Hungarian poet, wrote, "Where there is tyranny, there is tyranny." It's not only in prison, but also up in heaven, and the Milky Way looks different. It looks like a border to a dictator.
I give the floor now to Jeroen Lennart, 1.5 minutes.
Yes, thank you, Madam President. Dear Ms. Orban, I actually read the programme of your presidency, but given this debate, I wonder if you actually read it yourself. Your first priority is strengthening European competitiveness, but at home you give the keys to your economy to China. You plead for stemming immigration, but you open the back door to Russians and you release people traffickers early from jail. You talk about protecting democracy and rule of law in Europe, but you abolish them both at home. You want to combat child sexual abuse, but your government protects the child abusers from prosecution. You talk about cybercrime as a major threat, but you spy on your own citizens with Pegasus. You call for sincere cooperation, but in Europe only resort to blackmail and obstruction and abuse of vetoes. You mention the sovereignty of Ukraine in your programme while travelling to Moscow to embrace the aggressor. And many Dutch citizens ask me, why does the EU keep funding such a member state? Why do we keep funding someone who criticises and obstructs the EU 6 days a week to only on the 7th day holds up his hand for some more cash? And the answer is that Hungary is so much more than this government. The Hungarian people already suffer from frozen funds due to the actions of Mr. Orban, and they deserve better and they demand better. And we will stand shoulder to shoulder with the Hungarian people on their way to a sovereign, modern, democratic and European Hungary, free from the propaganda factories of Mr. Orban and free from the control of his gang of oligarchs. Change is coming to Hungary, and even Mr. Orban will not be able to stop it. Thank you.
It doesn't work. Thank you. Next is Victor Negrescu, Vice President. 1 minute.
Doamna președinte, domnule prim-ministru,
Madam President, Mr. Prime Minister, Romania and Bulgaria were admitted into Schengen partially last year after 13 years. And so far it's been a success. But now with the elections in Austria, I hope that the full accession won't be blocked with fake arguments. It's time to admit Romania and Bulgaria fully into the Schengen area, and I hope the real problems Hungary has won't affect this commitment. Our citizens are tired of this ping-pong game between the populists and the institutions. The free movement of people in Bulgaria and Romania should be respected. And therefore, at the Justice and Home Affairs Council, I would like you to propose the member states to come with real perspectives for Schengen accessions for our two countries. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor now to Tom van den Driessen. 1 minute.
President, ladies and gentlemen, the European Union initially started as a project designed to obtain peace, prosperity and freedom. However, colleagues, that was a long time ago. That's no longer the case. Rather than that, we've replaced it with a drive to centralise, uniformise and bureaucratise everything. And to try and push those ideas, they use financial intimidation and political blackmail. The climate created by the new Green Deal is frightening. The Asylum and Migration Pact has led to more illegal immigration and, of course, illegal crime. At the same time, it's also leading us down the slippery slope of endless wars, and no one's got the slightest idea how we're going to get out of that spiral of war. We have to take stock and step back to the early roots of European cooperation. It really is time that we move back to politics based on common sense. The days of EU technocrats is over. Patriots for Europe will help bring that to an end.
Quite a lot behind time. I close the catch the eye and blue card possibilities now. So next is Beata Szydło. 1 minute.
Pani Przewodnicząca, Szanowny Panie Premierze.
President, Prime Minister, it was supposed to be a debate on the priorities of the Hungarian presidency. Very important issues. We were supposed to talk about economy, security, jobs for our citizens, the things that are the most important for Europeans. But this debate has changed into some sort of judgment on Hungary and its government. Madame von der Leyen made a scandalous speech. Really, no one gave her the right to talk about independent governments of sovereign countries. And I want to remind her that the EU consists of sovereign countries. And Madame von der Leyen is not a queen of Europe. I also want to say one more thing. You are talking about democracy a lot, about the rule of law. But how do you understand it? When your friends are in power, then this is democracy. Look at Poland now. Rule of law is being violated all the time. Are you talking about it? Are you disturbed by this? No, because your body is the Polish Polish Prime Minister now, Donald Tusk.
Give the floor next to Danuta Nerudova, 1.5 minutes.
Prime Minister, in just 3 months, your presidency has revealed your true vision for Europe. You began by hijacking the presidency for a grandstanding trip to Moscow, pretending to seek peace while playing into the hands of Russian propaganda. Here we are, 66 days later, and Mr. Putin still continues to bombard and occupy Ukrainian territory. You then pushed through doubtful visa policies for Russian citizens, bypassing essential security measures at a time when Europe faces an escalating threat of Russia's sabotage and espionage. Now, your close collaborators are even revising historical memory in Central Europe, a country that, like mine, saw Russian tanks rolling through the streets, now suggests that defending freedom is a mistake. This is profoundly disappointing, given Hungary's history of resisting oppression. Today, I heard no real vision on competitiveness or security. You always say you are a man of action, yet all you gave us is a list of meetings your presidency will organize. Is this your way to make Europe great again? The young, pro-Western and reform-minded politician you once were would be ashamed to see what you have become today.
Thank you very much. Nacho Sanchez Amor, 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam President. Mr. Orban, the European Union is not a prison, and EU foreign policy is not a straitjacket which prevents member states conducting their own policies. The limits to sincere cooperation are defined by the treaties when it comes to cooperation and mutual support. Member states have to refrain from any action which is contrary to the interests of the Union or which can hamper its efficiency. Your promise to be an honest broker was violated as soon as your presidency started. Your international peace trips should have been done under a Hungarian flag. That would have been fine, but you shouldn't have been using the European Union flag. You have no mandate from the European Union to go to visit Putin or indeed salute Xi Jinping. Thank you, Mr. Orban, for your essential efforts in pushing for the qualified majority system. You've done more than any European federalist when it comes to bringing the question of a QMV to the top of the agenda in terms of foreign policy. Thank you.
Prime Minister, colleagues, the European is facing a profound crisis of leadership. The leaders of the EU institutions are no longer guided by common sense. They are imposing harmful economic policies or even more harmful ideologies. For them, democracy is democracy when it brings victory to their favourites. And then, having the support of the EU institutions, you can do anything. An extreme example of this pathology is the action of Mr. Donald Tusk in Poland. Mr. Weber gave him as a role model. But do you know what is happening in Poland now and what the government led by Donald Tusk is doing? And now, in the middle of crisis, the government of President Orban is trying to undo the harm. Of course, I know it is impossible to undo all the decisions because it's impossible to do it in half a year. I'm only expecting one thing: never give up, be a bright spot on the map of Europe and a role model for other nations.
To Stephen Nicola Bartulica, 1 minute.
Zahvaljujem kolegice I kolege.
Thank you very much.
distinguished President, distinguished Prime Minister Orban. First of all, I would like to thank you. I remember your support when Croatia was about to accede to the European Union. However, today, as far as the priorities are concerned, and Hungarian priorities, I must say that Serbia, as a candidate country, is not ready for membership, and it's far from it until it admits its responsibility for the tragedies and the war crimes in the 19th, and until it agrees to pay war damages, it has no place in the European Union. However, today you are a political target in this House, and the reason for that is that you misunderstand to say so European values. And you say today that you are in favor of a God-fearing Europe. And you are right. Europe is in a crisis because of a lack of awareness on the importance of Christian heritage, and you are able to bear witness to that. You have our support. Keep fighting and fight until the end. Thank you.
Next to Carlo Ressler. 1.5 minutes.
Distinguished President of the Government, dear colleagues, in the proximity of Hungary, we see the third cold winter, war winter coming. Everyone is well aware that this is not the time for ideological or politicking, but for a true look at the reality that surrounds us and for taking responsibility. Whoever thinks that peace can be ensured by going back or hiding is helping counter an aggression that is contrary to the civilization. Going back means admitting that our architecture has changed truly. Our social architecture has changed. We have diversified our energy resources. We are no longer dependent on fossil fuels from Russia. And Hungary, yet, is still deeply dependent on Russian energy sources as one of the few countries that import Russian fuel. Hungary imports Russian fuel, and yet we still have to find alternative sources. The only reasonable solution is the Adriatic terminal and the LNG terminal on the island of Krk, a new energy node that has the potential to further strengthen the energy independence of our neighbors. Therefore, what are the steps that Hungary is taking to reduce its dependence on Russian energy sources? And how does the evasion of procurement via alternative routes a true guarantee for a safe union?
1 minute.
Vielen Dank.
Thank you. Viktor Orban has the presidency. What a joke. 6 years ago, we called upon the Council with Article 7 to show that there was a serious harm for the fundamental rights in Hungary. And have they done anything? No. And Viktor Orban is now pulling Hungary ever further away from democracy and the rule of law. Last year, he brought in his sovereignty law in order to spy upon critics of his regime. In April, they had at the Parliament, they were able to decide to have influenced court decisions in their own interest. So, Mr. Weber mentioned Article 7. He said it was an atomic bomb, but the damage for our values and our community of values is not through Article 7, but from the fact that it is being ignored. So it is time. There should be no more EU money for anti-democrats. We should draw a clear line. And I hope really that Hungary will find its route back to democracy and the rule of law and fundamental values.
Harald Wilimski, 1 minute.
Prime Minister, I would like you to feel heartily welcome in this House, and I hope that you will excuse all of the meanness, the insults, the lies that have been hurled at you by the left of the left, the Greens and the Socialists. They do not represent this continent. They represent the desperation of parties who are losing their voter base. I'd like to thank you for helping defend us from illegal migration and for working for peace. I'd also like to thank the Hungarian population, which has supported your reforms. And I'd like to apologize to all Hungarians for all of the mean comments that we've heard. We are a parliament. Of course, we can argue with tough arguments, but I do not think it's correct that a Prime Minister in office is called an idiot, a corrupt politician, or a dictator. That is simply unacceptable.
Mr. Wilimski, your time is up. Mr. Wilimski, your time is up. You have been asking all morning for others' time to be kept. I ask you to keep yours. Mr. Wilimski, your microphone is off. You cannot be heard. I give the floor next, while reminding everyone about the use of respectful language, to Jack Madison. 1 minute, please. Stick to time.
Yes, thanks so much. First of all, Mr. Orban, we, as a Conservatives, of course, we can agree with many aspects. We can agree that we need strong migration policy. We need to turn around the crazy green ideology. We need to protect our heritage, our culture, our Christian values, definitely. And I also agree that there are so many double standards and hypocrisy in the EU when we talk about the Russia policy. We are importing more gas than before the war. So we are financing the Russian war against Ukraine. That's true. But at the same time, it's not a very good excuse to do the same. Because when I remember very well, a few weeks after the war started, when there was a question, is Hungary allowing to use at least a territory to move the military aid to Ukraine? Hungary said no. Why? If we talk about diplomacy, every war will end finally with diplomacy. That's true. But the question is that which consequences there will be after the war. Because today we see a huge risk for the whole of Europe, also for Estonia, to my country. And what have you done, really, to stand up against Russia and to protect Ukraine, even if you have difficult history with Ukraine? But this is the question for the future and our security. What have you done?
Thank you. I give the floor next to Laurent Vince. 1 minute.
Thank you for the floor, Madam President, dear colleagues. Since its inception, the European project was built on dialogue and measured decisions. Today we mostly witnessed a forceful political exchange, but no dialogue, and not about the Hungarian presidency priorities. Maybe next time. The core of the presidency programme is competitiveness. Presented in July, it anticipated key elements of President von der Leyen's programme and the Draghi report. Same starting point, almost the same conclusions. But now we should work together to find the right policies, tools and resources to win the battle for a competitive Europe. This is what the citizens are awaiting from us. Tisztelt miniszterelnök úr, egy szívemhez igen közel álló téma is ott.
So, this is a theme which is very close to my heart in the presidency, and this is the minorities and protecting their cultural heritage. There is support across the mandate for that this is necessary for the member states and also for candidate states. And with regard to the Council and the Commission, we find it important that there should be no double standards. There shouldn't be forgotten groups within Europe, and this is much more difficult. What possibilities do you see for that in this issue?
1 minute.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Monsieur le
Thank you,
Premier
Madam President. Prime Minister.
Nous sommes ici au cœur de la démocratie européenne.
We are meeting today at the heart of European democracy to send a clear message to you. You and your friends will not win the day. Pressure on the media, forcing justice to follow ideas, pressure on LGBTI, stigmatization. Mr. Orban, the more you try to dismantle the rule of law in Hungary, the more we will defend this rule of law elsewhere in Europe. The more you collaborate with Mr. Putin in the war which he launched against Ukraine and Europe, the more we will support the people of Ukraine in their resistance, and the more we will do to rebuild European defence. The more you defend the interests of Chinese and Azeri dictators, the more we will do to defend European general interest. You and your friends from the European extreme right are the shameful face of capitulation and surrender in Europe. You are not patriots. You are actually the Trojan horse of hostile foreign interests, resolute adversaries of everything we stand for, everything we want to be as Europeans. Our strength comes from your weaknesses, and your time in office, I think, is moving to an end.
Csaba, 1 minute.
So, honourable MEPs, in Hungary, I've heard elected MPs from Hungary speak against their own country. We can't get used to that, and we are never going to accept it. So, Peter Magyar is here today, and bear in mind, it is important to know a few things about him. So you should know that when he started with politics, he actually bugged his wife's. And he also stole his wife, and he also stole a mobile phone. And he did that because somebody had taken a sound recording of how he was behaving with women in a pub. So I have to ask whether you really want to rely on somebody like that in Hungary, whatever decisions you make. So be careful with your mobile phones if you're here, and watch out who you're sitting next to. So, Honourable House, competitiveness is becoming weak. The Schengen system is crumbling. And what is the European Parliament doing? Most of them, they are just carrying out witch hunts. Is this really the most important thing that we should be doing? And this is not in the interests of Europe.
To Zoltán Tár, 1.5 minutes.
Thank you, President. Thank you, Prime Minister. So, when you said that there is no parallels to be made between the Ukraine and 56, but the colleagues behind you, a colleague sitting behind you, actually drew this parallel and created a great deal of anger in Hungary for people living in Hungary, but not just for Hungarians, but also has made many people angry here too. So, Hungary is in a great deal of trouble, and this is proved by the current Hungarian government's behaviour during the presidency. The presidency is yet another. When you listen to the Hungarian Prime Minister, there is no better place than the present Hungary governed by the present government. But all the same, this presidency is another lost opportunity, not just for it's not just that it's leading my home country astray, but it's leading the whole EU down the wrong path. And so, if you have although it's not like communist times when I would be beaten up by police thugs for criticising, but it must be said that the complete agreement of the State Party, I was kicked out of my public position in April because I was calling out the connection between church and state. So as a politician, it might seem that we can speak freely about any subject, but the information that we have to share doesn't get across because our message can't be heard above the noise of pound shop propaganda. It may appear, but I'm glad to say that during the European elections, thanks to the will of the people, the TISA party is the vanguard of this change which is coming. And we are going to rejoin the European Public Prosecutor, and we are going to bring back from Brussels the 8 billion euros which Hungarian people are entitled to.
1 minute.
Thank you for the floor, President. So, Mr. Orban, it was very interesting to see how nobody is. So, it's your real tasks that you seem to be very proud of, the actual things you have done. So, there are more than 2,000 people smugglers which you allowed out of prison. Why is that? Why don't you say that it's your government that's has been connected with a PDF file scandal? And also, there's the greatest inflationary increase in the price of fruit and vegetables in Hungary and not somewhere else. And you're bringing people from the Far East instead of encouraging Hungarians to come home. So, and also the stealing of European funds, because your best friend from your childhood has become the richest person in Hungary, and you have been stealing money in order to buy villas. So you are a traitor, Mr. Orban, and you should be ashamed of yourself. And you shouldn't have allowed you into this building.
We have many requests, and I will take them in the order of the groups and in the way that they came in, starting with Branko Grims. 1 minute from the EPP.
Vsem lep pozdrav. Madžarska je vsaj v dveh stvareh lahko zgled Evropi. Prva je dosledna zaščita meja in zavračanje ilegalnih migrantov.
The consequences of proper border protection and sending back of foreign migrants is an important issue. Hungary is calm. The whole of Europe should be like that if we were to close the borders with all legal means available to us. That's the best way for us to protect children against LGBTQ ideology. More than 80% of voters in Hungary want protection of children along these lines. A society that protects children has a future. That's why, dear Mr. Orban, I would like to wish you the best of luck and the best of luck for your people and for your presidency. I would like to see a strengthening of a Christian Europe, the only true Europe, a Europe of the nations.
Gracias, Presidenta.
Thank you, Madam President. Prime Minister Orban, the European Union is not a foreign power. We are a directly elected parliament. 450 million people around Europe voted for us, including 10 million Hungarians. And they want to be part of Europe, despite the pressure being exerted by your government against the European Union. We have a European anthem. We are united in diversity. That's our slogan. That applies not just to the European Union itself, but also to individual member states. Open societies have no place for xenophobia and discrimination of minorities. Hungary holds the presidency, and we've been talking about Article 7. That's the procedure for conditionality for rule of law when it comes to accessing European funds. Hungary is not in compliance with the rule of law. Hungary is not in compliance with recent decisions from the European Court of Justice. So, until you and your government, the President interrupts.
Thank you. The Hungarian left-wing press and Peter Magyar are so angry. They say this is going to be a large battle with Viktor Orban, between the two of them. And what's happened? Well, basically, just the best bits out of Peter Magyar's Facebook page from this summer. So he even left at home his favourite Hitler quote. But all the same, it's been extremely embarrassing to listen to him. So afterwards, Manfred Weber has stood up in this parliament and recommends this person for Hungarians to pay attention to. When this speech from Peter Modler, who referred to Hitler just a few days ago in Budapest, he should be ashamed, and the EPP should be ashamed as well.
I give the floor next to Tobias Bożenski. Tobias Bożenski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. What is happening in this chamber today, it's the summit of hypocrisy. The MEPs have transformed this chamber into the court over Hungary, but you have no right to judge Hungary. Democracy is that the Hungarian nation has the opinion of its prime minister. It's not up to us to quote something about fascism. You don't know what fascism is about. Fascism is about shouting and not letting people express their mind. Democracy is free election, so if a nation chooses a parliament or a prime minister, then other nations have to respect it. And you do not respect.
Helmut Brandstätter. Go ahead.
Mr. Orban, you've often referred to competition and competitiveness. Why is it that you put Austrian companies at disadvantage, and then when your country is taken to the ECJ, you then start acting against those companies? And we've heard all of this from the lawyers representing the Austrian companies. You talked about competition with China. Of course, that's important. At the same time, you seem to be contracting debts with that country, which means you're dependent on that dictatorship. So how much debt does Hungary have with China? We've also heard about Russia. Are you aware of the fact that Putin is a war criminal? Your foreign minister recently travelled to Iran with a view to strengthen economic ties between that country and yours. Iran is a terrorist country. We've heard that Iran wants to destroy and eliminate Israel, but you seem to want to do lucrative business with that country on a more personal level. We know about these corruption allegations. You know these allegations are correct, so what do you intend to do?
Siegbert Frank-Drose.
Frau Präsidentin, vielen Dank.
Madam President, thank you for giving me the floor. This morning, in your introductory remarks, well, I know this House. Parts of this Parliament are being closed out of parliamentary work. Mrs. von der Leyen is shy of appearing herself and shy of facing debate. I'd like to thank the Hungarian people. People have spoken a lot about 1956, but Hungary was a dream for many people before the Iron Curtain fell. I'd like to thank their people for having made that dream real. Opposition politicians are sorry, I'd just like to say you're a symbol of hope for many people across Europe. Thank you.
And finally,
Distinguished Prime Minister Viktor Orbán, I'm a proud Slovak leftist, but I'm ashamed for what I see the so-called leftist Social Democrats and Progressives doing here. That's a deep disrespect towards Hungary and Central Europe. Slovaks are rooting for you. Together with you, we are facing against illegal migration. Slovaks, together with you, are against the federalization of the European Union and fight for the national sovereignty. Slovaks Slovaks are fighting against militarists and Russophobes who are sitting in this room, and I will probably follow your example, and in a few days I will go to Moscow to lead peace dialogue with Russia. Mr. Orban, remember, this is not you are the extreme. You have a strong mandate from the Hungarian nation. They are the extreme, the neoliberals, progressives, militarists and warmongers. Thank you, Mr. Orban.
I give the floor now to the Vice President of the European Commission, Mr. Šefčovič.
Thank you very much, Madam President, Prime Minister, honourable members. I believe that you would agree with me that this was one of the most politically charged debates I ever attended in this House. And I think that it is just underlining how many problems, how many open issues, how many difficulties and challenges are on the table. As the President of the European Commission said this morning, when it comes to dramatic events like terrible floods a few weeks ago, Europe will always have the back of Hungarians. This is how, in practical terms, the notion of solidarity was turned into the real tools of action through civil protection mechanism and solidarity fund. But in many areas, the European Union also needs Hungary to be part of the team. Be it in the challenges highlighted by you, Mr. Prime Minister, raised in Draghi report, or push for growth, common defence, lower energy prices, circumventions of sanctions, or overall competitiveness. But also, we need you to be a part of the team to face the challenges clearly underscored by the President von der Leyen, especially on Ukraine and on migration. Mr. Prime Minister, you and many honourable members talked about peace. And I think that we have to be absolutely serious about this. It is the Ukrainians who first and foremost long for peace. Therefore, I'd like to quote Ukrainian Prime Minister Shmyhal from yesterday. He stressed the importance of reaching just and lasting peace that respects Ukrainian sovereignty and territorial integrity. And this should be also the peace we all should work for. Honourable members, Mr. Prime Minister, there is a very difficult road ahead of us, ahead of all Europeans. Geopolitics and major powers will try to influence Europe, to divide us, and to put us into a vulnerable position. Best response, our strongest weapon, the major leverage we have is our unity. United European stance is the most precious currency in any relationship the European Union has. The role of each EU presidency is to forge this unity. To conclude, I would like to highlight once again that we need strong, we need united Europe to face the challenges of the future. Without it, all Europeans, including Hungarians, will lose. Thank you very much, Madam President.
Thank you. Thank you also for keeping to time. I give the floor now to wrap up the debate, Prime Minister Orban.
Perhaps the right thing, first of all, would be to say thank you to the President for handling this rather stormy debate, and to thank, on the half of the Presidency, to thank the Bureau. So unfortunately, this debate has gone beyond the boundaries of what it should have covered, and went far over the boundaries of truth. So most often, it was simply, there were absurd accusations that I've heard, which are based on party lines, which are propaganda. I would have been quite happy to have discussed other questions about the Hungarian presidency, so the rule of law, to talk about corruption. But unfortunately, your propaganda has not made that possible, and I would have liked to have been able to say that the European Commission's report, according to that, Hungary, with respect to the Justice Department, they have met all of the requirements from the Commission's side. And I would have liked to have said that it's not about George Soros corruption financial reports that you're reading. If you're not reading that, then you see that with regard to corruption, that Hungary is holding its own and is no different from your countries. If there had been a sensible debate, then I would like to have been able to say that the procurement system in Hungary is, according to the Commission itself, in compliance with all of the requirements. And I would have liked to have been able to say that, according to most recent research, democracy is better than most, in a better state than in most European countries. So the Hungarians go out and protest, and they can do that with confidence. So I would have liked to say all these things, but unfortunately this debate went past boundaries of truth, and it turned into cheap propaganda in the Parliament. So there's also been accusations of me that I'm corrupt. I'm used to it. It's been the same for the last 35 years. Everybody knows that there's nothing true about this, and it's all left-wing propaganda. So I'm coping with that quite well. Thank you for your interest. President, there were one or two political points, however, that I can't leave without making some kind of a comment. So, MEP Daniel Freund, who says that there's corruption in Hungary, well, he's the most corrupt person because he's receiving payment from George Soros. He pays for the reports that Freund draws up about Hungary, and I've never seen anything so corrupt in my life. So, a Netherlands MEP has said that they are financing Hungary, that the Netherlands is financing Hungary, so the net paying countries. Well, but you take a lot more money out of Hungary than what you're sending to us. You are all winning. You're all winning a great deal. We're not doing you favours when in this respect. So we are all looking after your pockets. So look at Hungary, look at the statistics. The foreign investment profits are much more than the money that you're giving to Hungary. It's what you're earning from Hungary. You are making money out of us. You are not supporting us. And I think it's terrible that some representatives of some rich countries are behaving as though they are attacking us because of European values. There's nothing like that. They just want to make money out of the Hungarians. They just want to make a good deal. But if you offer a good deal to Hungary, then we can work together. And with the European Parliament plenary, to have to listen to the comments made about rule of law, which, well, they are saying that they're insulting peaceful people on the Budapest streets. Well, that's not about the rule of law. I find it absurd. I find it absurd also, President, that you have an MEP from Belgium who wants to teach Hungary about rule of law. When there's a conference, when we want to have a conference on rule of law, then they want to block that. Isn't that absurd? Is this possible? Well, it's also, this kind of hypocrisy is amazing. Unfortunately, I've also had to listen from a Hungarian MEP that we don't worry about people's problems in Hungary. But I heard it from somebody, a Hungarian MEP whose party in the last, well, they got 8% in the European elections, whereas our party got 45% of the vote. So who's interested in, who's taking care of people and their problems in Hungary? And then the socialist MEP, who they say that we have too close a relationship to Putin. So, Klára Dobrev, it must be said, you've had Putin in your kitchen, sitting at your kitchen table, and you were really proud about that, and you put a picture of it in the Hungarian media, and yet you accuse us. And that was when your husband was Prime Minister of Hungary. And I have to say, and I'm sorry, but somehow, unfortunately, I must apologise to the MEPs because they've been drawn into an internal dispute in Hungarian politics. So I'm sure you can see Hungarian democracy is doing very nicely, thank you. It's very, very energetic. I'm sorry that the discussions, the domestic discussions of Hungarian MEPs have been present here today, because I don't think it was the right place for them in this debate. There's nothing I can do about it. I still have to react to these comments, I'm afraid. So I am convinced that it's not the right way if you've got a Hungarian MEP is attacking their own country in the European Parliament. What kind of thing is this? They're in an international forum and they're attacking their own home. I also find it quite absurd if what the EPP MEP had to say, the Hungarian, who said not long ago, you can see it all, it's all in the newspapers in Hungary, that they are attacking us despite their comments that they've made in the Hungarian papers. So I think it's pathetic that somebody who's a Hungarian talks like this here, but they're actually subject to criminal proceedings in Hungary for stealing public funds, and they've only taken this mandate here in order to be able to hide behind the parliamentary immunity. And that is your moral responsibility. And I think it must be said, I must say that I have realized that the left, they only want democracy if they win. If the right is winning, then that's the end of democracy. They don't want democracy. And this debate, has shown me that it's quite obvious
και τα μεγαλύτερα. Έχουμε υποτυπώσει 250 έργα, τα οποία είναι αναγκαία, ώστε να μην αντιμετωπίσουμε πρόβλημα λειψιδρίας το επόμενο χρόνο, το 2025.
The already difficult situation has been aggravated by the climate crisis and by the huge increase in tourism.
Οι ειδικοί επισημαίνουν ότι έχει έρθει η ώρα για γενναίες και γρήγορες αποφάσεις από τις πολιτικές ηγεσίες που θα λαμβάνουν υπόψη πρακτικές οι οποίες εφαρμόζονται σε άλλες χώρες, αλλά και πολλά υποσχόμενες καινοτόμες τεχνολογίες οι οποίες μπορούν να αξιοποιηθούν. Από την πλευρά των πολιτών είναι απαραίτητη η αλλαγή κουλτούρας στη χρήση του νερού.